We don't care. Just the same. We ignore the race and we ignore the fight. We need a miracle. Watch over there, it disappears. We lose it all and shed no tears. Behind the progress, behind our walls, we had it all and we want more. It's just a dream that turns into nightmare. The future is out, we run out of time. It's just a dream that turns into nightmare. We don't care when you got a name. We don't care, we are just the same. We ignore the waves and we ignore the fight. We need a miracle. We know it's bad, then we forget. It's not a problem, it's not our fault. We know it's crazy, how all is said. It's not a story, we have to change. It's just a dream that turns into nightmare. The future is out, we run out of time. It's just a dream that turns into nightmare. The future is now, what's been done so far. Leave a silent word. We don't care when you got a name. We don't care, we are just the same. We ignore the waves and we ignore the fight. We need a miracle. We need a miracle. When the sunlight will go away, we stand here with nothing to say. When the ground will break away, we stand here with nothing to say. We don't care, you call our name. We don't care, we're just the same. We ignore the waves and we ignore the fight. We need a miracle. We need a miracle. We need a miracle. We don't care when you got a name. We don't care, we are just the same. We ignore the waves and we ignore the fight. We need a miracle. We need a miracle.
Hello there, Comic Clan, and welcome to Comics in the Cross, the greatest streamers that you have never heard of. I, of course, am always your host, Cross, and I am not joined by Nitro this week. He is not with us, but we do have some very special guests joining us on the show. We have the team coming all the way from One Geek 411 podcast. Guys, say hello to the Comic Clan.
Hello there.
Oh, I think some of y'all are still muted.
We're getting used to
Hello.
Twitch.
Hi,
There we
friends.
go.
You know what, muted at the start, that's the easiest technical issue we've had so far. As true Comics in the Cross fashion, nothing but technical issues right before we start. Wouldn't be one of our podcasts
You're the
without
problem child.
it. It's alright, it's usually Nitro, someone else has to take it, he's not here this week. But we are so happy to have you all here with us this week and joining us as we're going to be looking at the MCU Phase 2. discussion I'm very excited about having, and really glad I got a great group of people to join me during it. So let me go ahead, get a little bit of housekeeping out the road, just so we can jump straight into stuff, just so it's out there. So first of all, let me go ahead and shout out our sponsor, Gamer Grind Co., the #1 coffee for gamers. Hashtag on that grind. You can see the logo right above Cameron there. Go ahead and drop it in the sponsor. You can go ahead and you can click on that link to get yourself some amazing coffee. Don't forget, use Comics in the Cross at checkout, save yourself 5%. And while you're there, hey, thank you so much, Ads, for the host. Absolutely appreciate it, brother. And of course, while you're there at Gamer Grind, why not pick yourself up a Comics in the Cross official mug and sticker as well? Because you know you want one. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want one at this point? Along with that merchandise, clicking on the wrong thing, you can also head over to our Teespring store. Link is now in the chat, and you can pick up, of course, some Comics in the Cross official merchandise. You can get a t-shirt, hoodie, Nitro's favourite, the leggings are still available. And also we have some new items you may have seen on our social media. You can pick up a kids t-shirt, you can pick up baby onesies, which I will be picking up for the new Baby Cross very soon. And of course we now have our very own masks, because the pandemic still seems to be going on. These don't seem to be going away, so why not shamelessly plug the podcast while I'm wearing my mask out in public? Because, yep, that's the sort of people we are. So,
Which is good advertising.
hey, I might as well advertise it everywhere I can.
All the new ideas for us.
Exactly, it's like, hey, you know what, we can sell masks, yeah, let's put our logo on it. Why not? Why not put it on there? Also, if you want to support the podcast, we are of course Twitch affiliates, so you can sub to the channel. You can do that via subscribing at a tier 1 at $4.99 a month, or if you have Amazon Prime, you can of course subscribe for absolutely free with your Amazon Prime account. So if you've got Amazon Prime, why not go ahead, just hit that subscribe button. You won't be disappointed. Actually, probably very disappointed. It's just me and Nitro rambling most weeks, but if that's the sort of thing you're into, why not support it? And then you can also support us over on our Patreon. Click on that link. You can support us for as low as $2 a month and help support the podcast. We'll still keep doing what we're doing even without the financial help. We love doing what we're doing and we love our community. But if you want to help us out financially, it allows us to do that little bit more for y'all. Alright, shameless plugging I think is out the road. Alright, so let's do a little introduction with our guest for this week before we jump into some stuff. We're of course going to talk about some news and talk about the MCU Phase 2. So let me hand over to our guest then, gentleman and lady. Go ahead and introduce yourselves. Who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourselves. Tell us why you're part of One Geek 411. Tell us a little bit about that. Let's delve into that first.
I'll start us off. So I'm Cameron, one of the people that started First Geek 411 way back in the day now. It feels so long ago. And I live in Dallas. I used to be a minister, not anymore. I now work at GameStop Corporate. And then big into Magic and the card game Magic, to clarify.
I'm going to say, assume you mean Magic the Gathering, not just Magic.
Yeah. On our stream, or on our stuff, we can just say Magic because we just talk about it all the time. But it's that, when we cross over, we got to make sure we clarify.
Why are they inviting these pagans onto them?
Yeah. And then D&D, video games, working on The Last of Us 2 Platinum right now. And so...
Nice.
That's good enough for now. We'll talk Phase 2. We'll get into Marvel thoughts with that, but...
Definitely. I do have to ask, you're working on The Last of Us 2. Not to put any spoilers out there, although I'm sure pretty much everybody knows the stuff for Last of Us Part 2 now.
Except Emma, who's playing it right now.
Yep.
And me, who hasn't touched it yet.
Just simple thoughts on it. Are you enjoying the game? Because I know a lot of people have had a bit of bad backlash at it. It's like, are you all that are playing it enjoying it?
I've also had no exposure to the first game, so I...
Oh, wow. So that's a heck of a thing to go in blind to.
Brand new, so I have no, pre-existing thoughts or opinions. But yes, I am enjoying it for a first-timer.
That has to be a conversation at some point that we need to fit in.
Yeah.
How are you enjoying Last of Us Part 2, having no clue about the first game?
The place that people could come for that conversation is First Geek 411.
Yeah.
And so we'll eventually be getting to have that talk.
Hey, we're all about shameless plugging here. So while
Oh,
you're
yeah.
plugging that, let me throw up some stuff in chat. So that first link I've thrown up there, hashtag Geek, pulls up the One Geek 411 website where you can go ahead and get most of their information about their amazing podcast. Listen to it there, and I'm assuming listen to it on all the typical podcasty type places, iTunes, Spotify, all the works.
And
We
Emma,
are
how far are
everywhere
you
as far
in
as we
The
know.
Last of Us right now?
I just got through the hospital area, so it's like 14 hours roughly, and that's also with me just dying shamelessly and
That happens.
finding collectibles because I get lost. So
Yeah. To add, just it's a really good game. Last of Us Part 1 is one of my favorite PS3 games.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so, and then this is why I'm excited for the conversation between Emma and I later, is because we were both coming to The Last of Us Part 2 on complete opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, so I
and-
definitely want to hear that conversation because
Yeah.
that's going to be interesting.
yeah, I read a summary of the first game before I jumped into the second one, just so I had some basis. But
Yeah, I was going to say, because going in completely blind, I can't imagine jumping into that game completely blind and
it's
having
like
no clue.
jumping into the MCU completely blind and picking Endgame to watch first. Like,
Yeah, it's like,
don't recommend it.
yeah, technically you can do it, but you're really not going to have a clue what's
No,
going
You're
on.
not going to enjoy it in any way, shape, or form.
Nice. Well, Emma, since you're telling us a little bit about The Last of Us 2, why don't you go ahead next, introduce yourself a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself as well, and how did you get
Yeah,
involved
sure.
with One Geek 411? Because like the guys above us are like the original guys who started it, and you are one of the new team members. So how did that even come about?
Yeah, so I went to school in Montana and actually ended up meeting Chris through Young Life, and woohoo! Got my Young Life flag on. And it was so I live in Colorado now after I graduated, and I'm much more of a science fiction person just in general than I am like anything else. I would say I love Doctor Who. I love fantasy. I've never played Magic the Gathering. The closest I ever got was playing with Pokemon cards in elementary school. But I'm getting more interested in D&D and that kind of role-playing game. And I'm getting more into video games, and I'm loving it. And I have been a guest on First Geek 411 in the past, a couple of times in the past, and just recently joined when Cameron and Chris were talking, and just hopped on board as a regular host because they were interested. So yeah,
Awesome.
that's me.
Alright, so at some point in the future, I was like, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Comics in the Cross is looking to expand, and we did kind of do a little test thing with Cosmic in the Cross where we were going to talk about sci-fi stuff. So I am so going to have to bring you onto that show to talk about Doctor Who, because I'm a big Doctor Who fan as well. Nitro knows practically nothing sci-fi.
I love science fiction.
Like literally our first episode was him and me talking about Firefly after he watched it for the first time, because he'd never seen it before.
Such a good show.
It so is. See, he hates Joss Whedon. He really doesn't like Joss Whedon stuff. So
Oh,
as soon as he
no.
saw Joss Whedon was attached to it, he's like, no. Like, I'm not going to like
So
this. I'm like,
it's a personal thing against Joss Whedon then. It's
yeah,
not
but I
just-
kind of don't blame him, because I kind of have that a lot for Joss Whedon stuff as well, for the most
Yeah.
part. That's going to come up during this conversation today about MCU2. But yeah, so I will definitely be reaching out to see about getting you on when we do an episode on Doctor Who, because I need someone to bounce off of that
Absolutely.
actually knows Doctor Who.
Count me in.
Definitely. Just to jump in the chat there, we've got Jay Sanchez 254. How you doing, guys? We are doing absolutely great. Thank you for coming in, John. Appreciate you stopping by as always, brother. John, a big supporter, and for anyone who's over on Facebook, John actually runs an online wrestling league called Bariqua Wrestling Council, where he has done some Comics in the Cross specials before and has shouted us out amazingly. So I want to give a massive shout out to him. If you are interested in wrestling and an online wrestling community, go check him out. He's an absolute legend of a guy, and he's shown us so much love in the past, so I want to return that to him. All right, so I think that takes us to the man above me, Chris. All over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to the people.
Absolutely. So I'm Chris, or wherever you find me, I'm not so foreign with a 4EIGN there in the spelling.
I've got to say, I love that name, the not so foreign. I love
I've
that.
had it forever, and it's one that's never taken wherever I look, so it's just kept.
I
kept
do have
living.
to ask now that you brought up, like, where did that come from? The not so foreign.
So originally, it comes from predominantly the where are you from question that I get
Yeah.
asked. I'm born in, well, I wasn't born here, but I'm predominantly raised. I'm very much American.
Yeah. I
And
kind of
it's like,
figured that might be where it comes from.
but also, going back to some of my favorite scriptures, you are, or of the, you are from the world, not of the world, or any of things like that. Also, like in terms of tying it back to the Christian cultural aspect of my life, that kind of, it just continued to fit throughout the different phases. So I continue using it, and it's been great.
Awesome.
But yeah, I'm one of the original founders of First Geek 411 with my good friend here, Cameron. And we kind of started because, well, first I flew out to PAX East in 2016.
Rest in peace, conventions.
Seriously.
Yep. Gone forever, not forgotten though.
And we always just joked. We were just joking, but then it became about a year later after that, as we got ready for PAX East Part 2. We finally launched this and decided it was a good excuse for us to keep in touch. And then more recently, we decided to add some more diverse voices. So we added Janine and Emma to kind of keep us balanced out, since Cameron and I agree on way too many things.
We
And
end our
so
show
that-
with a top 3, and we have like a loose rule that we don't repeat things. And we had one that was 100% match between the two of us. And so,
True.
yeah, time to bring in
So-
some new voices.
When we do our top 3 anymore, it's like, we try to, like, we end up with more obscure things on our top 3s because Cameron and I are trying, like, well, Chris is probably gonna have this, or Cameron's probably gonna have this, so I'm going into the weeds a little more, trying to find something that's more unique to me, I guess, than trying to avoid what Cameron and I cross over, or we always just have backups so we don't overdo it. But
So that's going to be interesting when we kind of get to the end of our MCU 2 discussion, and we kind of start to list off, like, what's your order of favorites in MCU 2. So I'm intrigued to see what your lists are going to look like at the end of that.
same. No, I'm just joking. This one we might have a little more disagreement here, but
Yeah, because I've
I've
heard
said
there's
this
some
before, I
hot
have an
takes
Iron
coming.
Man 3 hot take.
Yeah,
I hope
there's,
you're
there's
ready.
a hot take
Hot
coming in
take.
Iron Man 3, so I'm intrigued to hear about that one.
until it's a hot take I agree with, I'm like, darn it.
Jumping back to the chat, I am El Tommy saying, hey everyone, hey Tommy, thank you so much for coming in, brother. Appreciate you stopping by as always. So to kind of do a little bit of an icebreaker, we've introduced you guys. We usually do a little bit of conversation about the news, so I do have a few news topics. We'll try and hit at least some of them. I don't think some of them are going to create like a great deal of conversation. It's just stuff that I want to mention. So the first big news that kind of came out this week, which I'm excited about, is that we all know that Avatar dropped on Netflix. It shot right to the top of the Netflix's top 10, as it should. Still one of the best shows ever created.
Mm-hmm.
Fight me
So true.
if anyone disagrees on that, seriously. Come into the chat and fight me, it's amazing. But its predecessor, its follow-up, The Legend of Korra, is now also coming to Netflix on August 14th. So there's probably going to be some mixed feelings on that one, because that show is definitely not as well received as The Last Airbender. But I'm excited for it. I have an absolute confession with Legend of Korra. I have only seen the first season of Legend of Korra. I have not seen seasons 2 to 4 of that.
Wow.
I want to. It just feels like every time I try to watch it, something happens and it kind of gets pushed off because other stuff's going on, and I've just never gotten to it. So, like, once that hits on August 14th, I know personally I'm going to be binging it because, like, I need to see it, because I've heard so much stuff about it. Like, I need to actually see it for myself now. But
So I'm a big Korra apologist. And so Korra is, as a series, and we don't have to go crazy deep down the rabbit hole, is a great example of what happens when a network messes up a creator's vision.
Oh wow. So
'Cause,
you're
like,
you're
I
not
was,
filling me with hope with that, Cameron. I've got to say.
and I'll get into it a bit more. But like one of the big criticisms of Korra is that it is not one continual story like The Last Airbender is. Each season is more self-contained, and the reason for that is Nickelodeon told them, "Hey, make one season." So they made one season. Then they said, "Okay, well, make another season." So then they made another one. And then they said, "Okay, make two more." Then they made two more.
I'm like, even though like literally it's based off of the Avatar stuff, and it's like the
Right.
best self-contained 3-season story arc ever.
Right. And so it's a great like test case in what happens when people are given goals that are not like, it's not a good like order from the company.
It's not
Yeah.
the real
So-
reflection of the work. Yeah.
Right. And so
Ah.
like there's at the very end of the first book, there is what could have been a very big cliffhanger, but they had to solve the problem in the last episode because they didn't know they were going to get another season.
Yeah, and like I'm not going to go into spoilers for the end of it for anyone in the
Right,
chat that
but I-
hasn't seen it yet, but like I have seen the first season of it, and I'm like, okay, so this is where we're going with this. This is going to be like the overarching thing, and then it's like, no, it's not. Like, wait, what?
Right.
What?
And
what?
then I will say, book 3 has my favorite villain in all of Avatar.
Oh, okay.
And so, yeah,
All right.
I think it's very interesting because Korra is very much focused on the themes of different types of government. And every villain kind of represents a different type. And so it's really interesting to look at it from that like perspective.
awesome.
but
I'm definitely
Again,
intrigued.
highly recommend.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued to check it out, and I'll definitely be watching it. But that definitely gives me interesting things to kind of mull over. Any of this, y'all? Any input on it? Excited for Korra? Fans of Korra? Hate Korra?
I already rewatched all of Korra after Avatar, after the last Airbender ended up on Netflix. I was like, oh, now I'm just gonna binge everything again, and just found another place to watch it. I guess ultimately, I think Amazon, or I purchased them back in the day on Amazon.
Yeah.
So I still had them, but I am excited that more people get to experience a further or different take on the Avatar universe. I'm very pro that. I even own the compilation comics and everything, the
Oh,
big
yeah.
hardback books, and I love them. They were
Yeah.
such great additions.
Special shout
And I
out to
love
to the Avatar comics. They're, if you've not read them and you want more of like Aang and Team Avatar, like it gives a whole new perspective on stuff, and the stories just expand really awesomely in the comics.
Especially if you're like a big Zuko fan, The Search.
Yep, which I am.
Oh,
Zuko is my man. From the first one, he is my favorite character. I love Zuko. I even attempted to reach out to Dante Basco to see if I could get him onto the podcast. Didn't work. But-
Yet.
Yeah, it didn't work
Yet.
yet. I was going to say,
There's
like,
hope.
to be fair,
There's hope.
the podcast has been running for like what 4 months. So to be fair, we're still fairly young to get a name like that. So I'm still in hope that he'll get on the show eventually.
Gotta be persistent. Just keep every 6 months or so. Just resend that email.
Yeah, I literally just keep pestering him. He's on Honor Society here on Twitch, and where they're doing like watching through Avatar: The Last Airbender right now, and he plays games and stuff and that on here. So like, I just keep pestering him in chat and stuff. Will you be on the show? Will you be on the show? That won't get annoying and get me banned.
So you gotta be just do it periodically. Hey, we've grown a little more. Are you interested now? And then just throw it back out there a few months later. Hey, so
Exactly. It's like, hey, we have 300 followers on Instagram. We're a big deal now.
Boom.
Boom, we've made it.
going viral, you know.
All right, let's jump into our next one. This is one more to just kind of throw out there. We've talked a lot about the DCEU on this show. Not in the best light, I'll be honest. For any DCEU fans out there, I apologize. We're not massive fans of it. But some news came out regarding Ezra Miller's Flash movie, which has kind of been heavily rumored for a long time to focus on the Flashpoint storyline. One of the best storylines in comics. I love Flashpoint. I love the comic. I love the movie, the animated movie they did of it. I don't know if doing it in a live action movie at this time is the right idea, but I was willing to give it a go. But they officially announced that it will not include a war between the Atlanteans and the Amazons. So it's still rumored to be Flashpoint, but one of the major storylines from the Flashpoint comic is Aquaman and Atlantis fighting against Wonder Woman and the Amazons. And like, that's not going to be part of it. I'm like, okay, so you're taking out like one of the biggest components of the story. One of the things that everybody would love to see.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, like, I don't know a ton about that comic. I'm not a big DC fan, but it kind of reminds me of the changes that we saw between Civil War from the comics into Civil War into the MCU.
Yeah.
Where, like, the end result's kind of the same, but how they get there is pretty different. And so maybe they're just trying to take that type of approach, or maybe it's a budget constraint. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is like the changes to Civil War. Don't get me wrong, like I'm a high speaker of the Civil War comic from Marvel. That was the comic that I read and I was like, yep, I'm a comic fan for life. I enjoyed superheroes growing up. I read that comic and I'm like, okay, I'm in. This is my life now, comic books. Seeing it on the screen for me was very much a case of it makes sense in the world that they created.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because you can't do the original Civil War story, which was like all the superheroes register, so all their secret identities. Because in the MCU, they really don't have secret identities. Everyone just knows who they are.
Yeah.
So there was definitely stuff to be altered. With this one, I'm like, there's nothing that's been set up that would stop it, because nothing's been set up. You've had like, what, 6 movies at this point, most of which don't connect to each other.
Pretty much. Yeah, like I've always had mixed feelings about the DC universe, mostly just because Marvel in general has done such a good job with this series connecting also to the cinematic portion itself, the movies.
Mm-hmm.
And DC has released a pretty good portion, like their CW series or the Arrowverse or whatever you want to call it anymore.
Yeah.
Is pretty well received, but it's a completely separate thing. So there's no causation or anything there. And then you get kind of, with the success of those, then you're doing live action portions of the movie, and you just get these weird, you have to look at those characters differently despite them being the same title thing.
Right,
And
right.
I think it just causes more confusion for maybe new fans. They're like, oh, I watched the Arrow, or I watched Flash on the CW, and this is not the same thing.
No.
So I'm always skeptical of the movies.
Where Marvel has put their effort into the movies, DC has put their effort into the TV shows.
Yeah.
And like, it's easier to have that connection when you put most of your focus on the movies. And even if the TV shows then fall apart, which is what we see with Marvel, some of their TV shows just flop, which if you're running on the movies instead of the TV shows, that's fine, because you can have the TV shows flop or just do like not as well and still be fine. But if you're relying primarily on the TV shows to keep the world intact, or relying on people to keep up with the TV shows in order for the movies to make sense, or just have them completely separate, you're just going to confuse more people. And which is why I've had a difficult time getting into the DC world, just because like the Arrow is a show, and you know, and then I go and see or watch Superman, and I'm like, well, this is not a good movie. Things like that. So
yeah, it's like DC's very much, it feels like a bunch of different houses being built with the same sort of stuff. We're going to do it in a different way. And I feel like just from the get-go, the DCEU has just been all over the place. Like, you know, even the big announcement of like the Snyder cut of Justice League, and I'm like, I was not a fan of Justice League, and like, I am not excited for his cut of it, because I've seen his cut of movies before, and I'm not the biggest Zack Snyder fan. There's certain things at work, and I'm like, I don't know if his cut can save it, you know. And I'm like, I don't know what they're doing. It's like, I feel like with the Flash movie though, they're throwing stuff out there, because that's what they've been doing since they announced they were doing a Flash movie. Nothing has ever been set in stone. It's just like, we're going to do Flashpoint. Why? Flashpoint's a reset button.
Because they already need to reset it. Like, that's the answer. Is like,
But it's like, you know, I mean, we're 6 movies in. It's like, reset button. Like, really? Is it going that badly? We need to Flashpoint it? Really? Like, your animated movies, you know, spoiler for the most recent one, they go ahead and try and Flashpoint that at the end, and it's like, yeah, but you've built up to that. You've had this series of movies building to it, you know. It's the comics was the start of the New 52. You rebooted everything. With the movies, there's nothing to reboot. Nothing's happened. But I guess just one of my favorite bits was the war. Like, it's one of the fun parts of Flashpoint is him trying to reset everything in the midst of this war between these two warring nations that humanity's stuck in the middle of, and it's like, we're going to take that out, and I'm like, then what's going to happen? That's like one of the main components of the whole story, is like, it's in the middle of this war that he created because of what he did. You know?
Right.
I'm like,
I can definitely agree with that, especially for like when you are specifically titling it something that's affiliated with a major story component,
yeah.
and then removing that piece. Like it'd be one thing to say we are doing something along the lines, and then but saying it is exclusive from and separate, and then titling it something different. But calling it, associating it with Flashpoint sets up way too many expectations.
No. I mean, that's it. I think it just, people get an idea and then you start changing stuff. It's like, why is it even Flashpoint, you know? Anyway, enough about the DCEU. We've rambled about that enough in this show. Jump into the chat. Ads has thrown up Ezra Miller with some puking emoji faces. So, not a fan. And then Nitro stopped by in the chat saying, "Sup Cross, just popping in to say what's up." It's like, good to have you, Nitro, if you're still here or if you're hanging about or whatever. Thanks for popping in. You know, whatever you're up to today in your break, I hope you're enjoying it, man. We'll see you back next week. So one of the big things happening this week has been, we've been doing Comic-Con at home. San Diego Comic-Con panels at home. Which sounds a lot more exciting than it actually has been, to be completely honest. And I'm like, it's not been much major stuff coming out of it. One interesting piece of news was New Mutants has a new cinematic release date.
I'll believe it when it's out.
It's coming out apparently, and I love this as well, like August 28th. Like, I don't know about where y'all are, but I don't think cinemas are like open like fully here yet. I don't see that happening in the next month to the extent of like, let's release a new movie. I'm like,
I know Alamo Drafthouse put out a trailer for like opening back up, so shout out to them. But like, I mean, granted, New Mutants has pretty much been set up to fail for 2 years.
It's like, I
but,
didn't realize how long it'd been doing this until like they
Yeah.
released that video, and it's like, this was meant to come out at the beginning of 2018. It has
'Cause
been,
it's kind of the opposite of Justice League, where it was like about to come out, but then they decided to do cuts, to do like a whole new cut, and then that didn't happen, and then the Disney Fox deal happened, and then like just all that kind of stuff, and so
yeah, it's just been constantly pushed back, and I'm like, so we got the announcement trailer. This is coming out August 28th. We even got a new trailer hyping up the movie and hyping up the fact it's still got its horror elements. They're still doing what they done before. Did we see the trailer? What are our feelings then? You know, like Cameron, you said like, I'll believe it when I see it. But
Yeah.
what are the rest of the feelings towards this then? To New Mutants, this kind of last hang on of Fox's X-Men universe.
In general, so Cameron and I are gonna have a discussion about Apocalypse later on, but I'm always doubtful about any new X-Men movie, just because how badly most of them have done.
Yep.
And or been. Like, I feel like Logan was the only good X-Men movie that came out of Fox holding on to those rights. But, like, so I'm always just like, oh, they're making another X-Men movie? Let's watch it to see how bad it is. And if it's even, like, fairly decent. So, in terms of New Mutants, I've always, like, I'm just skeptical. And again, like, I'll believe it when I see it. And whether or not it's good, it will be another matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I can completely understand that. You know, Fox definitely does not have the best track record of what they did with the X-Men franchise. I do think there are some enjoyable movies. Don't get me wrong, I don't think they're on the level of like the MCU movies or anything like that. But especially some of the early, like the first couple of X-Men movies and stuff, considering the era they came out in, like we started doing a series on here, you know, like early 2000s movies, like so looking at superhero movies pre MCU, the early 21st century, and X-Men was one of the groundbreakers for that. You know, like in 2000 that dropped, and between that and Spider-Man, it changed the comic book, you know, movie landscape really, and set up stuff. So I think there's definitely great stuff in there, but they've got way more misses than they've got hits. Absolutely.
Yeah, and like I can't even actually tell you the last time I watched an X-Men movie itself.
Yeah.
I think one of the better things that has come out of, I guess, the X-Men storylines. I mean, granted, it's not great, but I definitely enjoyed Gifted, or The Gifted, the series, when that was coming out. But yeah, in general,
Yeah. Gifted was a kind of sleeper hit. Like everyone literally watched the trailers for that and thought this is going to be crap, and then like people watched it and went, "Oh, wait a minute, this is actually really good." This is actually a really good show. I'm like, way better than I had any right to be.
They did such a great job just like humanizing the mutants and kind of just like they're actually like within their conflicts within standard society and the opposition against them. It was a phenomenal series for, especially by comparison to the X-Men movies.
Oh yeah, I mean the movies just got worse and worse. There was some great hits, like I liked some of the early ones. Days of Future Past was probably one of their best movies they did. I think they handled that really well, like bringing both casts together for that. I thought it was done really well, but like I mean some of them are just absolutely awful. Like Apocalypse is so bad. From the moment I saw the look of Apocalypse when they released that picture, all I could think was, oh no. I've seen cosplayers do better Apocalypse outfits than that movie studio pulled off. Like literally I've seen pictures somebody posted of like a cosplayer and it looks just like the X-Men 1992 cartoon version of Apocalypse, and it looks so good, and I'm like, how did he pull that off? He's a cosplayer. You're a movie studio.
Yeah.
But and then I can't even comment on Dark Phoenix. I never even watched it, and I have no intention of watching it. I saw the trailer and I'm like, nope.
I'll say it has really good effects. Like they actually like that's about like that's the like
That's the only
if you
thing
can't
it
say
has
something
going
nice
for
then
it.
yeah.
That
Like,
literally sounded like a scraping the bottom of the barrel, trying to find some
Right.
sort of compliment
Yeah.
for them there. Like, it's got good effects.
and I
It's
will
aesthetically
say
pleasing.
the version of Cyclops they have in Dark Phoenix is not awful. And they misuse Storm.
But he's also not
Like-
great.
Right, he's also
Just
not great.
Not
Yeah.
awful.
It's like, he's
I
not...
mean, Cyclops in general is one of those characters that's in that ground anyway.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, you either really like
Right.
Cyclops or you're kind of like, eh.
He exists. Yeah, he's a mutant.
He's a mutant.
We've got ads in the chat saying, I like what they did with Quicksilver, puts Avengers version to shame.
To be fair, well, and we'll talk about this later. The Avengers version puts Quicksilver to shame. Like,
Yeah.
it's just not a good use of that character.
Oh, no.
It's true.
I watched that movie and I'm like, there's literally no reason for you to be here. There's literally not.
Right.
Like, you can literally not be in this. You have no factor in this movie, and it's the only movie you're in.
Yeah, I mean, the most productive thing that he does is move people out of the way from a train.
Yeah.
Like,
And
You
it doesn't.
could remove him from the movie and still have a complete movie that makes sense.
Yeah, that's literally one of my complaints when I was watching it. I'm like, and as much as I love Scarlet Witch, you can even say that about her in this movie. Like, you can literally take the two of them out, and it has no bearing on anything.
Outside of just the setting up for the future.
Yeah, but even at that, it's like, well, it sets up the future of Scarlet Witch. There is no future to set up for Quicksilver, which, you know, spoiler for a movie that came out in, what, 2014?
right. And that's the problem with MCU Quicksilver. It's very clearly set up that he will die in that movie. Like even if you just look at how they treat the characters side by side, it's very obvious early on that Scarlet Witch is going to live and be a
Oh, yeah.
prominent part of the MCU, and Quicksilver is
Yeah, because she
not.
has a personality.
Right. Exactly. She has character development and growth, and Quicksilver just runs. So
Yeah.
All right, so I have one last major thing on our news. I want to just kind of throw it out there. I don't want to delve further into Avengers just yet because we're going to get into all of that in a sec. And this one I wanted to mention because we talked about it on our news a couple of weeks ago. There was a big announcement of a crossover between the Transformers franchise and the Back to the Future franchise. This
My
result.
question is how.
yeah.
Well, initially, like
Those two
this,
did not.
The
go
DeLorean
together.
is a
DeLorean.
transformer, actually. I
yeah,
hate
like
to break
literally, this started off with that. This is apparently a bigger thing than I thought. When we announced it, it looked like there was some images of it, like, and it was a new Transformer, a new Autobot called Gigawatt that time traveled, which was basically a DeLorean that transformed. I thought it looked pretty sweet, and apparently they were releasing a toy of this. At first, it looked like it was just going to be the toy, released exclusively to Walmart. Walmart underestimated how many people wanted this, and it sold out in seconds in pre-orders. So like
In
even
general,
even later that day, I went to look and have a look at it, and I was like, "Yep, they're gone." I'm like, and then they came out
Wow.
and went, "Oh yeah, this is actually going to be a thing," because both properties are owned by comics are owned by IDW Publishing. It's a great comic house. If you like some of this sort of stuff, they do a lot of actual like well-known property series. There's going to be a 4-issue mini-series of Transformers crossing over with Back to the Future from Kevin Scott and Juan Samu, if I'm saying his name correctly. I don't know any of their work specifically off the top of my head, and it says two of the greatest science fiction franchises of the 1980s will collide this fall in an all-new comic book crossover event, Transformers Back to the Future, written by Kevin Scott, best-selling author and writer of IDW Star Wars Adventures, and illustrated by Juan Samu, Marvel Action Black Panther. The 4-issue miniseries will debut in October from IDW Publishing. In the debut issue, Marty McFly returns from the adventure of a lifetime to a new, better Hill Valley. That is until Marty and his friend Doc Brown's time machine attracts the attention of the Decepticons. With one small mistake, Marty finds himself once again thrust into action to unravel a Decepticon plot in the past, present and future. Now with the help of a new, converting time machine, the Autobot called Gigawatt.
Sure.
So
this
yeah,
is still going to be better than the movies,
Yeah.
the most recent movies, where it's just
wouldn't
like,
be
oh, we'll
wouldn't be
do-
hard, to be fair.
Right. This
Really.
would actually make a good movie. Like, this would actually probably be one of the better movies that's come out recently if they made this into a live action movie too.
Yeah,
It very goes along with their theme. It's like, what's next? Dinosaurs, knights. It's like, just gradually, hey, what about Back to the Future?
yeah. Well,
It's
we've
just like,
went into the
okay,
past for
let's
these
do it.
stories, so let's actually do time travel now. Why not?
Exactly.
I'm not
Because
gonna
we
lie.
can.
They've been here all along.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I'm up for this. You know, especially since it's very much based on like more 1980s like Transformer stuff, which is where the comics kind of converge off of, and crossing that over with Back to the Future. I'm like, I'm in. I like Transformers. I like Back to the Future. I'll give it a go. I mean, it's a 4-issue miniseries. Like, it's not a massive investment. I'm like, could be really good. If not, it's Back to the Future and Transformers. Like, I don't see them getting it that badly.
Right, and it's not a huge investment. So I mean, like, if it goes buzz, it's like, well, the total production was how much versus letting a movie go bust. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
it's just a fun concept in general.
Yeah, I mean, I love when they do crossover stuff in these things, because we've seen crossovers from IDW before. They've done crossovers with other companies, obviously the most famous kind of being like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with Batman and stuff like that. They've done Hey, Bursted for Days, thank you so much for the host, brother. I appreciate it. But yeah, we've seen like crossovers from them before. Like, they did a massive crossover with like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Ghostbusters series in their comics, which is actually fairly decent. It's actually really well done, considering you like those properties really probably shouldn't mix. Actually, it was alright. It was it was enjoyable enough to pick up in a comic, let's put it that way, you know. Would it
Right.
work as a movie? Probably not, but as a comic, hell yeah, let's do it.
Or fan films. Sometimes I love fan films when they pick up just like
Oh,
a
yeah.
quirky.
Like the fan film
Story
Power
set.
Rangers.
Yeah, that was so good.
That
Like when they
trailer,
did
or
that.
because it wasn't like a full film, but it was like what, like a 5-10 minute thing.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
and they got some
That was-
really. The thing is, that was a fan-made thing, and it's like they got some really big names for that, considering.
The
And
effects are better than many like feature films.
oh, I
Right.
know. Just want to
That's
shout
so
out to the
good.
chat. IML Tommy saying that sounds exciting. Transformers and Back to the Future. Yes. And thank you as well for that host, Tommy. I absolutely appreciate it, brother. But yeah, it's like personally, I'm on board for this. I'm on board to check it out. If it's crap, it's like it's 4 issues. You know, it's not going to break your bank. It's like, what's that? $20? You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's like
If that.
it's not bank breaking to go and check this out, and you know what? It might actually be, you know, enjoyable. Any sort of crossover, I'm generally like, yeah, let's see how it goes. You know, crossovers are always fun. Not just saying that because we're in the middle of a crossover right now.
It all ties together.
Yeah.
My whole life is a crossover.
Okay, that requires more questions asked there, really.
Yeah, it really does.
Like, in what
Please
way?
elaborate.
Who are you constantly crossing over with, and why?
Don't ask questions.
Just don't ask, just accept and go.
Just
All right.
take it and move on.
So that's pretty much it for our news this week. There was nothing else major that kind of came up this week that really to delve into. If there's anything in the chat you guys heard this week want to throw in, go ahead, throw it out there. But you know, at this mark, I think it's a good time to kind of jump over and start talking about the MCU Phase 2.
Woohoo.
Oh man.
Oh yeah.
So let's start off. Overall arching feelings of this phase. We kind of were talking about it early on when we were kind of before we started the streaming stuff. What's your overarching feelings looking back at this phase? Because you know, I know looking back at Phase 1, we kind of had a feeling of, you know what, it still holds up pretty well. It's clearly early superhero movies, but for the most part, they're all still pretty good and pretty enjoyable. What's your overarching feelings of Phase 2? And Phase 2, just for everyone in chat, we're talking about is Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Captain America Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, and Ant-Man. That's the official MCU Phase 2 is those 6 movies. I don't know why they ended it with Ant-Man and not an Avengers film.
Well, they do the same thing in Phase 3. There's
Yeah,
the,
like
there's
I've
the Avengers film, then there's Spider-Man at the end. They kind of just give you a nice little conclusion thing.
yeah,
I
it's just like a
guess.
nice little thing at the end. Like, because I always felt like Avengers Age of Ultron was like at the end of Phase 2 and like Ant-Man was the start of the next one because it ended with Avengers at the end of Phase 1 and it's like, no, that's part of Phase 2. Like, okay.
Right. That was the original plan. Ant-Man was supposed to be a Phase 3 movie, and then they're like, yeah, just end it for Phase... Well, it'll be the close for Phase 2. And they kind of do it as like a breakup from like the seriousness that is the Avengers films.
Yeah.
And going
Good
Age of
intense.
Ultron straight into Civil War.
Mm.
I guess there still would have been Ant-Man in the middle, but like the Ant-Man would have just been in Phase 3. But like if like
Oh yeah, you
Age of
needed that
Ultron and
Ant-Man
Civil
break.
War are heavy movies.
Yeah, you need
Right.
that
Well,
Ant-Man
yeah,
break in the
Ant-Man
middle. Definitely.
It's very light-hearted in comparison to the movies that bookend it. You've got Age of Ultron and Civil War, which are very like politically, focused in comparison to Ant-Man, which is just this normal guy who happens upon an Ant-Man suit.
Yeah, it's kind of funny when you think of that because you've basically got Avengers 2 and Avengers 2.5. These big,
Yeah.
massive stories, and then like right in the middle is just Ant-Man, and it's almost like we need to put that there for a break, and because that way we can get him into Civil War.
Yeah.
He's actually
I mean,
established.
remember-
Exactly. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
good introduction for him.
When
All
I
in
saw
all,
the trailer,
oh.
sorry, Chris. When I saw the trailer for Ant-Man, I was very skeptical and was like, "This is going to be a terrible movie. It already looks horrible." And then I was pleasantly surprised when I saw it. So
Oh yeah, I think a lot of people were. I think this for me very much felt like this was the stuff where like we started testing the waters. Like, I mean, I don't know if you remember early 2014 when before we even got a trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy. That's a massive property now. Everyone involved in that is a huge name. No one knew who they were. Comic book fans were not big fans of Guardians of the Galaxy. It was not a property worth investing in. Ant-Man. No, nobody knew who Ant-Man was. He was such a small, minuscule character, no pun intended. Um,
Right.
And it's
And
like,
that's to an extent like the story of the MCU. Like
Yeah.
Iron Man
Yeah, it's
wasn't as
true.
big of a thing. Thor, even Captain America.
oh
Like,
yeah,
X-Men was the property. It was X-Men and Spider-Man,
yeah,
and that's why they were sold off.
yeah. They sold them
was-
off because Sony like literally. There's a story of like that Sony turned down buying some of these other characters. They only wanted Spider-Man. And it's so
It makes
funny
sense.
looking back now of like that. Yeah, they weren't a property back then, but like look what Marvel did with them, and I'm like, wow, I bet Sony's regretting that now.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Not that they would have done anything amazing with them, but I'm like, oh, this is what you could have done. I mean, people forget that with Iron Man, it was literally a gamble. If that had failed, it was done. Jon Favreau was not that big of a name as a director, and he fought for Robert Downey Jr., who was not a name that anybody wanted to work with at that point.
No.
He'd killed
He
his
was, like,
career.
fresh out of like rehab and
Slightest.
everything.
His
Like,
career
he-
was done. He was a nobody. He shot himself in the foot so many times. He got into drugs so many times, and Favreau fought for him. And yet, all those components, without them, it wouldn't have worked. No one else
Well,
would have worked in that
I
role.
agree.
There is like, I've seen it said so many times that Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark. Like,
Oh yeah,
they are one and the same. Like, I couldn't ever imagine anyone else in that role because
he's
He's-
so
he
much Tony.
fits it.
Yeah, he's so much
He
Tony
fits it
Stark
so
that they
well.
changed the comic to match him.
yeah,
They literally
Like-
changed Iron Man in the comics. If you read the comics pre 2008, Iron Man is nothing like the way Robert Downey Jr. plays him.
yeah.
Nothing.
And it works and it fits the character. He fits the character of Tony Stark. Like, even just hiding snacks around the set of the first Avengers, and he just like
I love
pulls
that.
out blueberries and offers them to Chris Evans in the middle of a scene. Like, it just works with that character.
Yeah.
It's completely unplanned, but it works. So
No, definitely, and I think that's it. No one else could have played that role. So since we're talking about Iron Man, let's delve into our opener for Phase 2. Iron Man 3. This was our step back into the Marvel world after the epic that was Avengers. And like Avengers came out like May of 2012, and there literally wasn't another Marvel movie to the start of 2013 when this dropped.
Right.
Heralded as one of the worst two MCU movies there are. Believed by most people, along with Thor: The Dark World, to be the worst.
You know, in general, rewatching Phase 2, I have a new appreciation in general for these. Yeah, at the time when they came out, Iron Man 3 was super lackluster. In general, villain was
meh.
terrible, very meh, not very compelling. I just have a grudge. But I don't know. It's such a cool movie though in general because you see the development for Tony himself is the important
Yeah.
piece of this movie
Yeah.
that we get to see through the end of Phase 3 and Phase 4, and anything that he's in, and also seeing all his Iron Man suits. That is by
Mhm.
far one of my favorite things of this movie is just the final scenes where he summons all the suits that are just fighting on by themselves and everything. It's not great, but I have a new appreciation for it just seeing how Tony's character progresses from this point and the things that happen in this movie.
Well, and that's a point that I was going to bring up about it. Was the one thing that I really enjoyed about Iron Man 3 was that you got to see the humanity of one of the big name heroes in this series, Tony Stark. Like, up to that point, he was this billionaire, cocky, like, he just is full of himself. And then you see him after the events of the Avengers just like fall into a pit of despair, like any normal human being would after like throwing a nuke into a giant wormhole and basically sacrificing yourself. He's just going to get super depressed and not know what to do with himself. So it showed very much a human side of what like a big superhero that he was held up as before that. And that was like the one big thing that I really enjoyed about that movie. Even though the rest of it, like, the main villain was and all of that, like it just displayed Tony as a human being, because that's what he was. He wasn't this god of Asgard or a super soldier, or
Yeah.
not that any of those other characters aren't human or any less of a human being than Tony, but they weren't played up to be this perfect, super rich person. And some of those characters had already had some of those points of humanity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, I hope y'all are ready.
All right. I've been waiting for
Hot
this.
take! I'm ready
Hot
for the hot
take.
take.
So, so I will say overall, Phase 2 was a lot better than I remember. This was my first time going back and watching a handful of these movies. Like, I'd seen them all before. This is my first time rewatching. And I'll say this, Iron Man 3, up until like 1 hour and 8 minutes, is the best movie in Phase 2.
I love the fact you've got the exact moment it goes downhill, though. Like,
Yeah.
hour and
It's
8
like-
minutes, and then.
Right, because it's like, I was watching it, and I was like, is this movie good? Like, I like legitimately was watching through it, and I'm like, I don't remember like loving this movie, but I am so into this. Then there's a quote partway through the movie that I wrote down, where Rhodey and Tony are talking, and Rhodey says, "This is the Mandarin," and Tony says, "I know, it's kind of embarrassing," which perfectly sums up the flip that happens in that movie right when that twist happens,
Yeah.
where everything up until that twist is so good and is so interesting. Then the back half of the movie is just garbage. Like, from a storytelling perspective, I love the suits. Like, they're super underused. Like, and I think Iron Man 3 would, if you were to go and remake every movie in the MCU for some reason, Iron Man 3 is the movie that would improve the most with what they've learned. Like, I think that the core story of Iron Man 3 could have been the best movie in the MCU. It was just executed so poorly with that twist. Like, if they would have actually just had the Mandarin be the Mandarin,
Mm-hmm.
would have been a great movie. But they were so reliant on wanting it to be Killian that, like, it just trashed the whole last half of the movie.
I got to kind of agree with that,
For
actually.
sure.
I think if that twist hadn't happened, I would consider it a lot better of a movie, I think.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you remove that twist and even remove the elements, because that's the thing for me, like, I'm going to say this up front, like, I actually enjoy watching Iron Man 3. For the most part, I'm like, it's an enjoyable movie to watch. If I don't sit down, I don't analyze it. It's like sitting down to watch Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
Deep down, it's not that great of a movie, but you know what? It's a fun time. I'll sit and enjoy it. And
Not bad enough to be just the worst time ever when you watch it.
exactly, it's not that bad. Let me jump into the chat quickly before I go on. Bursted for Days has a few comments just saying, going back to the crossover we were talking about, I think crossovers are good as long as they've been taken serious, they do a good job in the details and tie them together and plot makes sense. Yeah, if the crossovers have a lot of input in them, 100% I would agree with that. Regarding Robert Downey Jr., says hands down he was born to be on that role. Yeah, absolutely, he is Tony Stark. And he says, I agree with that, the twist through the movie on the trash pile for me. Like, that was the big thing, was... The problem with me for the movie is that they didn't rely upon the Mandarin. Their big bad was Extremis.
Right.
They tried to set that up from early on, like, and even Killian wasn't the original villain, it was meant to be the chick, I don't even remember her name.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the woman he sleeps with that creates Extremis. She was meant to be the big bad, and then there was some rumour that apparently they were worried she wasn't going to sell toys because it was a female bad, and I'm like... And I went back and watched the movie and went, yeah, you could have made her the villain, it's still a crap movie with that twist. That's not a better twist.
Right.
No.
And so one of the things that I wrote down, because for chat, I wrote down some notes as I was going through and rewatching them just so I could remember everything. One of my notes for Winter Soldier is, imagine if the twist that was in the Winter Soldier was the same as Iron Man 3. Like, if it was setting up Bucky as the Winter Soldier and just kidding, it's Extremis.
Yes.
Like, it's just like that. Like, I don't know if they were just too worried about those twists being, well, not being twists. Like, I guess is the way to say that.
Yeah.
Like it's just I don't know who greenlit that decision, and it just doesn't make sense.
No, because like the thing is like you set up the Mandarin so well. Like, see if you take out
Right.
what he was. Don't get me wrong. One of my guilty pleasures for the MCU is Trevor Slattery. See, when you find out Ben Kingsley is actually Trevor Slattery, I'm not gonna lie, I find him hysterical. It's awful in terms of storytelling, but there's something about me that just loves Ben Kingsley just being allowed to go off in this random direction. I don't know what it is. There's something about me that loves like just getting to see that. But in terms of the movie, I'm like, you had this perfect Mandarin.
Definitely.
The videos
He was
with the 10
great.
rings, like, and all the stuff he was doing, even the background to it of like all the stuff that's from our culture that is actually American and it's actually making things worse. It's actually fake. Here's how we're going to do this. And I'm like, you could have done all that stuff. Get rid of extremists. Like, oh, we can't find bomb parts. I'm like, let them find bomb parts. Just plant bombs. Just be that sort of terrorist. You were doing fine.
Just have the Mandarin be the one behind extremists.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
That's,
or
yeah,
something
that's
along those lines.
Yeah, just
I
have him
think-
be that sort of part. I'm
you
like,
don't
it's like
need the twist.
you could literally, if that's the thing for me is like that. The chick that's in part of it. Oh, I am so sorry for
Yep.
our chat. A bunch of people are getting timed out. I have no idea why it's not telling me. I absolutely apologize. I don't know what's going on. My chat's getting people kicked out for some reason.
Oh no.
I apologize. As I've said a few weeks ago, we got our Skeet Spot. He is our new chatbot. He is new at this. He still isn't quite working properly.
Oh, it looks like people were trying to share links.
Oh, was it links? Okay, that'll be why then. I don't know what links you're trying to share. He's very iffy on links. If it's links to like a clip or something like that, best case is probably share it to our social media pages. If it's for other stuff, write it in the chat, tell us what it is, and I'll try and put it in. So I absolutely apologize for that. Did I miss any actual conversation during that? Ben Kingsley is a junkie in the movie. It was very disappointing. Yeah. And hey, Werewolf, how you doing? Good to have you in, brother. So yeah, I apologize to anyone that was sharing stuff. If it was something good, if it's not, then it was deleted for a reason. But yeah, I think we had a great villain in the Mandarin. I think he was absolutely awesome for what he was.
Right.
And then
I
that
think
twist, like you could literally have taken out the woman that made Extremis, and could have taken out
Maya Hansen,
Killian,
by the way.
and legitimately it wouldn't have changed anything on that storyline. Like you could have taken that out, just had the Mandarin, and it would have played out so much better just like that. Because like even the stuff of like him setting off the bomb that takes out Happy, and when Tony challenges him, come to my front door, come to my house, and he sends the missiles and he blows up Tony. All of that stuff's amazing.
Again, like
Yeah.
up until that 1 hour and 8
that's
minutes.
phenomenal. Like I want to see more of that.
Right. I think the extremist portion is important for this, just because just having a standard military power in the MCU at this point just isn't as exciting. Like that was the entire basis here. Like you just got out of a major battle with world invading aliens, and now you just want to return back to dealing with standard politics. No, it's like you need a strong superpowered villain at this point, and that's where
Yeah.
Extremis came in. So I think that was an important piece. But yes, I definitely agree with Cameron that the twist was why.
Yeah, that's like the
Unless you
twists
like
and-
directly
yeah.
tied him to like Hydra, that would have been all right, because that would have
Right.
set up for the
Yeah.
rest of phase 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're even like kind of retconning this, right, with Shang-Chi. Like they're
Ye-
bringing the actual 10 rings in. And
Well, they
they're,
actually retconned it, and like, see when they started doing some of those MCU shorts. There's an
Mhm.
MCU short that's called "Hail to the King," and it's about Trevor Slattery going to prison, and actually that the Mandarin is actually a real character. It's like Killian was never the real Mandarin; it was a name he took on.
Yeah.
And there is actually a real Mandarin who is the one we're going to end up seeing in the Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings.
Okay.
So they already kind of like, it was like immediately they felt the backlash for that and went, no, he's not the Mandarin. It's okay. We promise. And it's like, okay, yeah, but like you literally had a perfect Mandarin. Who you
Yeah.
could have
And, like,
even brought
and even
back for
then-
this. You could have even brought him back for Shang-Chi,
Right,
bring
that's what I
Ben
was about to say.
Kingsley back, and
I mean, you could technically They did acknowledge that the guy was offered, like, plastic surgery was performed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like
So they can
I
have,
mean,
it be, have him be like a lookalike.
you can manipulate this in such a way that you can bring him back as the Mandarin and his actual character. But
yeah, like you
might
could
be a
actually
little
do it.
forced.
You know, it's like I felt like I don't know. I felt like there was a major story, and it like literally felt like someone just went, "Oh, what if we did this and did a twist at the end?" For no reason. I mean, it literally feels like they had this contained story that would have actually been pretty decent. It would have been good. Like the writing for the most part was great. I wasn't a fan of the early stuff, like the whole relationship drama between Tony and Pepper. But as I went back and rewatched the Iron Man movies, I kind of get fed up with that anyway. Like, I was the same in Iron Man 2, and I'm like, you two are just not entertaining to watch together. Like, I think that was one thing going back and rewatching these movies, is like, when this first came out, I was a lot more forgiving of the Marvel movies, because I was totally fanboyed in after Phase 1. Like, everything they did, like, this is a good movie, I can see what they were trying to do. And it was like, and looking back on it, I'm like, no, you really were missing the mark on some of this stuff that just, it didn't hit, you know?
Mhm.
I think one of my biggest gripes for this movie, though, was after the amazing kind of like final fight. Like, I love the final fight with all the Iron Man suits and stuff. Absolutely brilliant, you know, done a great job with that. I love seeing the different suits with the different powers and all this. They make this whole big bit at the ending of him blowing up the Iron Man suits and him having the, you know, the arc reactor taken out of his chest. All this stuff. And it's pointless. Because the very next time we see him following this movie is the beginning of Avengers, where he's back in an Iron Man suit and he's built this Iron Legion that's working with him, and he's doing all this stuff, which you can argue, like, okay, after the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Avengers needed to step in. But, like, literally the very ending and all this stuff he does, like, I don't need the suit. I am Iron Man. So let me go and build a suit and all these other robots to help with this. Yet
But
again.
it just blew up.
Yeah, like...
yeah.
And you build this Iron Legion, like, you could have literally just kept these suits. They were all working autonomously anyway. You could have literally just kept all of that. And, like, and kept your own Iron Man suit. Like, he goes through this whole big thing to destroy it all, and then it's like, nah, I'll still just do it.
Right, and I was like, that's definitely something I was gonna bring up when we got to Age of Ultron. Was, wait, did Iron Man 3 happen for Tony?
Yeah. Can I also
Are
just...
these
The
just
issue
out of
too with
order?
with all the Iron Man movies, like you mentioned going back, like Iron Man 2 completely retcons the relationship growth that Tony and Pepper have had. It completely retcons it. And then like this time it kind of was like a half retcon. Where
Yeah.
it's like part of it's like they're actually like together and stuff, but like it still retcons some of their growth
Yeah.
out.
I don't know if it's better or worse, because Iron Man 2, like, if you look at the background stuff for that, it didn't have a script. Like, so much scenes between them is just ad-libbed. This one actually had a script, so I don't know if that makes it better or worse, to be honest. But yeah, you're right though. It's like it retcons all this stuff, and can I just throw in as well, like at the end of that, like he gets rid of all these suits, and you see him at where his house used to be. He takes the arc reactor and throws it into the ocean. Flashback to Iron Man 2. You created a new element that was self-sustaining, and you just threw it away.
Yeah.
You literally just threw it into the ocean. I'm like, it's not like that can be used for anything else. Like,
Yeah, because that wasn't the point of the previous Iron Mans either.
yeah, like
That
you were
developed
dying.
This
You
crazy technology in this size, and it has this crazy power source. Imagine if it fell into the wrong hands, and I'm gonna throw it into the ocean and just see if someone random finds it.
Yeah, and just hope it never comes back. And I'm like,
Which someone would in the real world.
Right.
yeah,
For
like
the real
someone.
world.
Someone's watching him. Someone knows where he is and what he did, and they're gonna go
Like-
right back in there and find it.
Even if they're not watching him, like, where does he throw it in the ocean? Does he do it at a random place? No, he does it where his house used to be. You don't think there's
Right.
people under there scavenging? Like, oh, I wonder what Stark tech he left behind that's sunk to the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
And just
I mean, we
digging
see that
around. They're like,
with,
oh, look, there's an arc reactor. I'll take that.
We see that with Homecoming. Like there's
Yeah.
people that are like
Yeah.
scavenging, like trying to clean up New York City. Like someone's got to come clean up the house that fell off the cliff into the ocean.
Yeah, like, you don't think they're going to have a new nice arc reactor with this new element? I'm like, really? It didn't make sense to me. Like, that whole ending part, I'm like, I get what they were trying to do, but I'm like, you know that Age of Ultron's coming up. You know what role Tony's going to play in that. There's no way you don't. What were you thinking?
Right.
I mean,
And it's
I guess his like what he's building kind of changes a little more. Like, I mean,
It changes a little more, but even then, like, he destroys all his Iron Man suits and, like,
right.
but he's automatically got another one. And it's like, did you keep one? Because you very heavily hinted that you got rid of them all, and then even though he's like designing other stuff, that was one of the big issues for this. Was, don't get me wrong, I love the way they handled his PTSD in this, because, like, as we said, he's just a guy, and he went through all this crap in New York, and it's like, and he's dealing with the PTSD of that, which is awesome. He would be. But the way he coped with that was building Iron Man suits, and I'm like, and then he gets free of that, and then he just goes right back to building. Okay, they're not Iron Man suits, but they're Iron Man droids. You know, it's still basically the same thing. He just goes back to that obsession. You know, and I'm like, I don't know. There was so much in here that I looked at and just kind of went, why did you do that? And that was the stuff that kind of ruined it for me. Was like, this has no point, or why did you do this? Because this comes up later in a totally different way, or like, you had the perfect villain and you changed it. There was so many questionable things in this for me. Like, I can still sit and watch it and enjoy it, but actually when I stopped and thought about stuff, I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it'd been really interesting if this movie was the end of Phase 1. Like imagine like seeing this end and then getting a like 2-year gap before the next MCU movie.
Yeah,
And so
that could have
we
been
as an
interesting.
audience we then would have been left with like, oh, is he done as Iron Man?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like for a long time there was like contract disputes and stuff with him, so it was
Right.
like there literally would have been a question of, is he coming back?
Right. But instead it's the start of Phase 2. And like, well, it's still like a couple years, right? Or a year until Age of Ultron.
Yeah,
Like, it's still not that, or 2 years, yeah. It's still not that far away in the grand scheme of things versus if, like, when you have movies in that gap versus if the MCU was completely quiet.
no, absolutely, and that's the thing. That would have been a really interesting take on it, and it would have made more sense. Even that would have helped it a little bit. Like, don't get me wrong, it wouldn't have sorted the villain problem, but even the ending, it would have been like, okay, yeah, he might actually be done. This might actually be a good wrap up.
Yeah.
You know, for me, the ending it felt like the end of Iron Man 2. When it
It
went
felt
through
like the end of Iron Man 1.
yeah. Well, I mean, like the end of Iron Man 2, where they do the whole thing of Nick Fury meeting with him. And like, okay, yeah, you're not ready to be. You can be a consultant, but you're not going to be an Avenger. Which is like the most pointless scene ever filmed before Avengers, because like, you know he's going to be an Avenger. In the very next movie he shows up in, you know, it's like, I get you were trying to do something, but someone didn't go, wait a minute.
Didn't we say this thing before?
Yeah. You know. Alright. We will push on with more of the MCU Phase 2. Any last thoughts on Iron Man 3 before we move on to arguably the other worst movie in the MCU in most people's minds?
I'm ready.
No?
I'm ready.
Alright. Let's delve in then to Thor, The Dark World. I'm going to go last because I might
Okay.
rant.
So my very first
Ooh.
note for this is, why do the Dark Elves look so dumb? Like,
Dunno.
we talked about this with Apocalypse. Like, why do they just look so bad?
What, you don't like the
Like-
plastic masks?
Just like, you know, basically, yes. But it's just like, that's such a weird decision when like the main Dark Elves look pretty cool. But
Mhm.
like, why do the grunts like look so awful? And you compare them to the Asgardians,
Because
and they actually like have
Because it
armor
saves them
and-
money of not having to put people in makeup by just giving them like a black like onesie that comes up over their head and then putting a white mask on them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point.
That's
but
literally the only reason I can come up with.
it's just so weird, and it's like the very beginning of the movie, like that's what it opens on, is the Dark Elves.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why? It's kind of like in Justice League, where one of the first shots of Henry Cavill is the one with the very bad like editing. To get
Why is
rid of
that
the
your opening
mustache.
shot?
Yeah, and it's just like, why is this the beginning?
Yeah.
Like, just why? Like any like give
You're,
me
you're setting a precedence for the rest
Exactly.
of the movie.
Yeah, pretty much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was just my initial thought. Just like on that very first 5 minutes, it's just
Yeah.
But why?
Literally, for me, the biggest reason I was excited for this movie is because Christopher Eccleston was in it, and he's the Ninth Doctor, so I'm always gonna find a connection to Doctor Who. So that was like the biggest reason I was excited for it. And then the
Oh,
rest
yeah.
of the time I was like, okay, like I'm really just here for the Ninth Doctor as the big baddie, and like that's it. Cool. Bye.
Yeah.
In
So
in general, Phase 2 struggles with villains.
yeah.
It's just like, okay, touche. Okay, fine. But I wouldn't say Thor of the Dark World is my least favorite in this phase. Granted, again, at the time, it's pretty bad. But again, the events that take place for Thor in this are very important for his development and really explain his depression in Endgame. I mean, this is where he loses his mother. This is where ultimately the last interaction he really has with Jane Foster, and everything, and kind of sets that all up in a pretty decent way. Again, all in all, a lackluster movie, but kind of, I would just say, important. Also, just a different different tone than the other Thor movies.
Right.
As a result, but definitely not my least favorite rewatching it again.
Yeah.
To me, this is the most like I feel like I could not pay attention and not miss much. Like, because basically, like to Chris's point, any scene that like Thor isn't like directly in, it's just kind of like why is this happening?
Yeah.
Like they do, and I'll say this as someone who is so excited for Thor: Love and Thunder, and the Mighty Thor is one of my favorite characters.
Yes.
Like they did Jane Foster so dirty in this movie, like which is like
They
by
really
no
did.
means a hot take. Like it's just like well known that happened, but like they just have such a cool idea of what they could do. I've been talking about this with the Infinity Bros, and like they give like Jane Foster the Aether, and then like this could set up how she was going to become the Mighty Thor.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and like it's a really interesting way to introduce the Infinity Stones. Like I completely forgot that this happened before Guardians.
Yeah.
So I always associate like, and while I don't know if they actually like say the word Infinity Stone in this,
It's
like,
definitely the movie where they start introducing them, though.
Yeah.
Right.
They
for
hint
the
heavily.
Infinity War
Right.
storyline.
yeah, because I think they
Right.
talk about there being 6 of these things, and one of them is this like stuff like that, and it's again kind of like Iron Man 3. There are some like really good gems in this, and then like just as like a whole, the rest of the movie is just like, hey, remember that time in Avengers when we stuck Loki in a trap and he got out? Like, let's stick Loki in a trap again. And like,
Let's see
sure,
what
he doesn't
happens.
get right. Like, and sure, like he doesn't get out the same way. Like Thor actually lets him out, but it's just like, come on,
Yeah.
like,
No, absolutely. Just going to the chat versus for days saying I have those comics and they are so good. If you're referring to the Mighty Thor stuff, yes.
it's amazing.
It's like if you have not read Thor comics, go read Jason Aaron's run, and in its entirety, it's enjoyable itself. But partway through, when it changes over to the Mighty Thor, when Jane Foster becomes Thor,
So good.
so good
And I'll say,
written to the
it
point of like
used to be on-
I'd be like,
Okay.
I'm so happy with her staying Thor. Like, just keep him as Odin's son and have her as Thor, and I'd be okay with that.
And it used to be on Amazon Prime Reading. You could actually read through the beginning of it, the first collection
Oh,
of like the
nice.
first graphic novel for free if you have Amazon Plus or Amazon
I've
Prime.
got that in paperback, and I really
Yeah.
enjoy it.
Yeah, it's such a good story, and that story makes me also depressed for this as well, and I'll get into that in a moment.
Hey, but we're getting it. Like
Yeah.
Thor: Love and Thunder, it's finally happening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm so excited for that. Like I I love Ragnarok. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's too funny, it's too over the top with that. I'm like, I really enjoy Ragnarok. I'm up for Taika Waititi
Yeah.
doing anything else with Thor. I'm like, I'm good.
Well,
Yeah,
that too,
Taika.
that fits with Thor's character again, kind of like Robert Downey Jr. with Iron Man. That it really felt like that sort of slapstick humor worked really
Mhm.
well with the character and personality of Thor and where he was
Yeah.
coming from and where he was going.
It definitely
Yeah, I
fits
think-
Chris Hemsworth's Thor, I think. You know, like if you went to the comics, it wouldn't translate as well.
No.
But the way that like Chris Hemsworth's portraying Thor, it comes across really good, and you still see him as this, as the god of thunder, as this threat. They portray it really well, like the humorous side of him, and then complete, you know, badass on the bridge, like when he coming down with the lightning coming out of him and stuff. Like they managed to weigh it up really well, I felt.
I feel like also like in terms of the development of this character, kind of him suppressing his grief, he overreacts with humor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I think in general, just looking at like an analysis of his character,
Yeah,
that's why Ragnarok was ultimately so good following this,
yeah,
and moving through and forward in that humor. He just kind of does that because he doesn't really get time to grieve in this. I mean, there's the funeral, but then he immediately goes into other events and
yeah.
everything. It's just he hasn't had time, and ultimately like that's what results in this end game Thor we get at the very end, where
Yeah.
it's like
Mhm.
I've been playing video games and
Yeah.
eating way too much. and
Well,
doing
that's it.
nothing.
It's like I think that's what makes Endgame interesting, because you get the kind of compounding of this. Like he's never really dealt with that grief of what happened
Yeah.
with his mother, and then obviously you get to Infinity War, where like most of the Asgardian people start to get wiped out. They save some, as we see, but like Thanos attacks and basically wipes them out like that, and then to follow up with the fact if he carries that weight of he didn't stop Thanos, he had that shot and he didn't succeed.
You could say he threw away a shot.
Yes. He
Wow.
did.
Really, we're going Hamilton references, really?
Mhm.
But yeah, it's like he takes that shot, doesn't work, and it's like, and it all just compounds on each other, and it's like, and when it finally hits him, it's like, yeah, he can kind of just go and grieve and just have it weigh on him, because there's nothing really that requires him to not be like that,
Mhm.
you know. But for my take on like Dark World, my initial thing with this was I just find this movie so boring. Like
hmm
so many times. Like there's some great moments in it, there's some brilliant moments in it, and I just felt it was so boring, and some of it was just so by the numbers. Like I absolutely hate when they're on Earth. Like when we're getting that whole intro stuff with Jane and the side characters, I hate the side characters in Thor so much. I can put up, like Jane, I can put up with, she's good. You know, I do think they screwed her over in this movie, which is why Natalie Portman left for like forever, before finally deciding to come back.
Thank you, Taika.
You know, it's
Thank
like,
you.
yeah, thank you so much for that, Taika Waititi.
Long may he reign.
You know, I love Selvig. I like Selvig in this. I like the fact that he's gone nuts after what Loki did to him. He's like, he's still functioning, but really not normally. I'm like, okay, yeah, he had Loki mess a bit with his head. I could see him go this route. The other characters, like Darcy and Ian, annoy the heck out of me. You do not need to be in this movie. I'm so glad they don't come back for Ragnarok. Please don't be in Love and Thunder. Please. But once they get off of like Earth and they go to Asgard, like he takes her to Asgard, and I'm like, and all the stuff that happens there and all the stuff in the Dark World. Yeah, okay, I'm in. And then they come back to Earth for the finale, and I'm like, really? And even that final fight isn't as good as, like, I think in my head I'm like, I could have written a better fight scene than that at the end. You
The
know,
idea that it's just not executed well.
no.
Like the
It's-
idea of like the places that they could have teased in that fight.
Yes, that's exactly
Like-
what I was thinking. I was like,
Like,
you
the
have
universe- the
the
universe
9
don't-
worlds converging.
Right.
Reality is meant to be all over the place. The ether is the reality stone. Reality is getting warped in all sorts of ways. What happens that's reality warping? Oh, gravity's a bit off.
Yeah. Like imagine if we were to, and of course, like we don't know where they were at with like Doctor Strange and stuff. But imagine like if we'd gotten into like some of that stuff. We met Dormammu, like
Mm,
even like just in passing, like things like that. Like what they could have done with that, even in terms of things that weren't set up, but just references.
yeah. Even
like,
just
you kinda
show us the
get
9
that-
realms. Even just show
Right,
us the
like-
9 realms they talk about. They literally go from Earth to the Dark World to they go to Jotunheim briefly. Like that's it. Show us these amazing
They
worlds.
definitely could have used that element of it a whole lot more
Mm-hmm.
and making it more
And
interesting.
and then the thing for me that I think just totally kills this movie, in my opinion, like, again, I'm a big Doctor Who fan. I love Christopher Eccleston. He was my Doctor. He's how I got into the show, was when it rebooted.
Yeah.
I fell in love with his Doctor. Like, they announced him for this, and I was so excited. Like, Christopher Eccleston's going to rock this. He rocks pretty much any role. He
Yeah.
does. He gets so invested in it. He is so bad in this. And it might not just be him, it might just be the writing round about him.
Yeah.
Malekith has no personality. He has nothing intriguing to him, nothing interesting. And I'm like,
Well, and I did
if you
read
want to
an
see
interview.
Malekith done right, literally, like I said, go read Jason Aaron's run. Malekith shows
Yeah.
up all the way through it, and then you want to see Malekith taking over the world, War of Realms, the big finale.
Yeah.
to Jason
and
Aaron's
Christopher
run.
Eccleston, he said in an interview about his time as Malekith that he really did not have a good time on set. Like, he had some issues with other crew members or something, and he just had a hard time on it. And
Yeah.
so like I definitely agree. Like I'm still gonna be there, like to like be excited about that.
Yeah, like
that
I'm still
Dr.
excited that he
Gilbert
was
gonna
involved.
be in,
Yeah.
but like, I could definitely see, and I just like you, where like it could have been stronger, but at the same time, if he was having a hard time on set, then
Yeah.
like there's only so much that he can do to improve his performance in a tough situation,
Yeah.
and the rest is up to the other people.
Yeah, like I don't know what the directing was like on it, and you know it sucks to hear that both him and Natalie Portman had issues on this movie with the work that was happening that you
Yeah.
know kind of put them off of it. It makes you start to think there wasn't a great working environment overall. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, even Chris Hemsworth said that himself. He was like he was ready to quit being Thor like once it was all done, and then as soon as he did Ragnarok with Taika Waititi, he's like, okay, I'm back on board for whatever you want to do.
Like it's
Yeah.
it's so crazy how this movie is like, even like just the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
Like we almost lose so much. Like imagine like even if like they still pull like the thing and Malekith dies or whatever. Like if we were to be ready to have him back as a recurring villain, similar to what
Yeah.
happened with Loki. Like if they actually gave him that growth. But nope, instead we've lost a really good actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like and to what y'all just said, it's like luckily we got Natalie Portman back, but like we like this movie almost cost so much
Yeah.
in the realm of like really good talent.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. Like, we almost lost so much because of this movie. Taika Waititi coming on for Ragnarok saved the Thor franchise. It really did.
Yeah.
I just wish we could get Eccleston back as Malekith and get him. See, if you read him in the comics, he's one of the biggest reoccurring Thor villains. He's
Yeah.
there so often. Read War of Realms, the story of him basically taking over the 9 realms and bringing this supernatural fight to Earth. It's like he's so charismatic. He's got such a massive personality. He is like he takes shots verbally at the heroes. He like completely tries to get in Thor's head. Like, he's like such a threat. I mean, like in the comics, he literally takes Thor's arm off, and he has to get this new arm because he literally cuts off his limb. Like, these two have been battling for centuries. Like, you could have built this up so much in this, and then even at the end when he disappears, like, well, you've won. The convergence is done. It's not going to happen again for forever. So you can at least let him run away and regroup and like come back. Okay, like after Ragnarok, after what Hela did, like have him come back in the 4th movie. Like, he has a new plan, a new strategy, a new way of doing things. It's you could literally set up so much for him, and they did nothing. Like, the Dark Elves were like an afterthought. Like, coming up to the finale, you forget like they're even in it.
relevant. Like there's legitimately
Wait,
like,
there's elves in this movie?
right. It's Malekith, and then I guess there's things in the background like
Yeah. Like, the only other one apart from Malekith that gets any sort of proper airtime is the dude that he turns into. Is it the cursed one?
yeah, something like that.
Which
Yeah.
is like the black elf who's like always just hanging around and literally doing nothing but standing with Malekith until he gets injected with something. And then it becomes this beast, which leads to some great scenes, don't get me wrong, like the prison break scene and the Dark Elves attacking Asgard. Like, that stuff's great. I love that. Like, that's phenomenal. Like, seeing the Asgardians fighting them in Asgard, like, so much better than at the start of the movie, which is like, you could
But
literally
even
have told
then,
us
you
that in a
don't
storybook.
really get to see them fight.
Yeah.
Like, because like so much of the focus is on Thor and Loki
Yeah.
that like you don't really see that fight as cool. Like, there's some of it for sure, and it's very cool.
Yeah.
But just like as much as it could have been,
Yeah, like, I want to see a war. I want to see, like, these beings from the before the light existed, who have been there since, like, the dawn of time, fighting against... Like, you don't even get that motivation. Like, it's a throwaway line. Like, why is Malekith doing this? Like, oh, it's to wipe out the universe so it can go back to the way it used to be. I'm like, you blink and you miss that. Like, you barely get the motivation for them. Like, really? I'm like,
Yeah, the build-up is severely lacking,
Yeah.
for sure.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, the very little to redeem this one, all in all. And
Yeah.
I mean, one thing also to note, since we are going into the second movie and third on, in this phase, they kill every villain.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, they kill off all the villains. There's no recurring villains potential from phase 2.
No.
There is the guy in Age of Ultron who becomes the bad guy for Black Panther. But
Oh, yeah.
he's not the main
Oh, yeah.
villain.
He's not the primary villain.
He's
Correct.
not
Yeah.
the primary villain. He's a side character in Age of Ultron.
Which doesn't
And
really
then-
work because he ended up getting killed off in Black Panther anyway.
right?
Right.
It's like, no, he is the main villain.
That was
Bye.
something that I didn't pick up on until I watched Age of Ultron again for Infinity War and Endgame. Like, I didn't realize the connection between the two until I rewatched it. But
Yeah.
there is that guy who shows up for a brief moment, but he's still.
Why does everyone's left arm get chopped off in this phase 2?
That's
Happens
true.
in Star Wars too, except the hands.
Yeah.
Right. Like literally this phase is someone's arm gets chopped off in every movie.
Yeah, that seems to be a reoccurring thing. I never
Like,
thought about
right-
that actually, but yeah.
Right at the end of Iron Man, Iron Man chops off Killian's arm.
Mhm.
Granted, he dies shortly after.
In Dark World, it's
I
a
think-
trick, but like Loki
Yep,
does cut off Thor's arm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
doesn't Malekith ultimately, or no, it's not Malekith. Someone lost both arms in the portal.
Yeah, he gets his limbs taken off because they cut
Yeah.
off with the devices.
Right.
Which can I
So-
throw
so-
that out there as well? By the way, for the big finale, like they kill him by basically tearing him apart using these teleporter things. The Thor has no idea what to do with them. He never asks what you do with them. He literally just grabs them and runs into this like ether tornado. And I'm like, I
Right.
literally thought about that. I'm like, what's he going to do with them? He has no idea what they are. He's not there for the setup. He's not a scientist. And it's
So I
like,
will say I like that exists because again, Jane Foster's a great character when you don't ruin her,
yeah,
and like you get to see this person who's just a scientist, like not a warrior, but she's able to use science to basically save the world.
yeah.
Mhm.
Like, and then to your point, somehow Thor's also figured it out, and he just
Yeah,
stabs
Thor's like,
him.
oh, if I throw these into him,
Right.
that'll beat him. And I'm like, how? You have no idea that'll work? Like, really? All right, we've ranted a fair bit about Thor: The Dark World, and we still have 4 movies to go. So let's move on to arguably, in a lot of people's minds, still the best MCU movie. Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Thoughts on Winter Soldier?
So again, the first note that I have on this one, it's crazy how much better this movie is than Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World.
Yeah,
Like,
it's like Iron Man and Thor took this big dip, and like Captain America just rocketed up.
On your left.
yeah.
They had me at that opening scene. That was more than enough. Just him constantly overtaking Sam.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this movie sets up so much cool stuff. I love Steve and Natasha's relationship in this.
Yes.
Like, it's so cool to see them as basically like as Natasha's like trying to help him cope with being a normal guy, while also being Captain America.
Yeah, I put in my notes as well. I love the fact that they didn't go the obvious route of making it a romantic relationship between them.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Yeah.
of them, they work together, they're friends, and like, oh, and there's something romantic. They're like, no, they're literally just, you know, best friends. They click with each other. They just work well with each other. They bounce off each other, and it doesn't go any further than that. Even though like we do see them like, you know, acting coupley, you know, when they're on the run, we see them kissing, all that. It's literally just, you know, for them being
It's
on the
a
run.
necessary part of the plot in terms
Mhm.
of like they're, as you said, on the run.
Yeah.
So they need to act like a couple because people are uncomfortable. Yay.
I love that, like even little things like she's like kiss me, like public displays of affection make people uncomfortable, and it's like just that little thing of like that's so cool, just that
And it's true,
little
like if you think about it, PDA does make people uncomfortable, so they're
Yeah.
not gonna look at you.
exactly like I
So,
love little
Just
things
a
like that in this
real
movie.
reality thing.
But yeah, I mean, when it comes to this movie, in all honesty, I can't praise this movie enough. Like, I don't know if it's my absolute favorite of the MCU. It's definitely like number 3, probably. Some days it probably is number 1, depending what day you ask me.
Yeah.
Like I watched this and I'm like, there's very little I can say negatively about this. It's still an amazing movie. I still love everything about it. The twists, the turns it takes, everything about it.
Yeah, definitely. No matter how you look at it, technically, just interesting, or in terms of interest or technicals, it's very good.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Unpopular opinion is this is not even in my like top 5 MCU movies.
Okay, we're going
Yeah.
forward with 3 callers.
It's not really in my top 5 either, but I don't think it's
Like-
bad. I don't think it's the worst movie.
Like, no, I definitely don't think it's terrible, but I like everything it sets up. I think it does a great job in progressing. But there's just a few things about it, especially with it being about the Winter Soldier, but he's such a small piece overall in this movie in general. And that kind of irritated me in general, just the title moving into this. And then we don't even like really get glimpses. Like we see him and then Natasha brings him up later on. And then finally we start seeing some development toward that era. But
Well,
in
that's even the
general, it's
case-
mostly about this conflict with in setting up Hydra. Like, that's what this movie is
Yeah,
mostly about.
but
That's
there's
what it's
nothing else you can
set up.
really
Yeah.
name it though without giving that away. That's the thing.
Well, and that's even.
I
the
mean,
case
true, but
in a way with Bucky overall. Even after the events of this movie, you don't see a lot of him throughout the like Phase 3 and onwards. You don't see a lot of him. Just
and which is also something I found really disappointing is like you
yeah.
dedicate this entire movie to kind of this big reveal and delegate him to this like kind of this background where we see him occasionally, we see him in like, oh well, he's still here, Black Panther, let's give him a part here and let's
Yeah,
kind of give him
get-
these cool things, but we never see him fully realized. And that's
Yeah.
kind of that's my biggest issue with this movie.
Yeah, I
Is-
can understand that.
It's like, yes, we're getting the Winter Soldier. Yes, there he is.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, he's definitely not as prominent. I think they place him well in terms of like setting up the whole Hydra stuff, and the fact that they're the ones that have kept him going. I like that they changed that bit of his backstory. I do remember going to the cinema to see this with a bunch of my friends who don't know the comic stories at all. Like going in, I knew it was Bucky. Like I've read the comics. I knew Winter Soldier was Bucky. They had no clue. That completely blew them away when it was Bucky Barnes under that
I
mask.
love that reveal.
And
That
I'm like,
reveal was
It's so good.
phenomenal.
It's so well done, and I'm like, I kind of wish I didn't know that going in.
Yeah. So I'm not super familiar with the comics either, but I remember figuring that out either like watching the trailers or something. Like I had rewatched enough of the previous movies like enough times over that I remember seeing him for the first time in like the trailer or whatever and going, that's got to be Bucky. Who else would it be?
Yeah.
Because it's Captain America, it's, you know, since there's hints of Hydra,
Yeah.
who else would it be except his best bud from World War II? Like,
Yeah, and I think they do a good job of, like, if you look close enough, you can definitely see the setup that it's Bucky. They definitely hint at it through it, but at the same time, I think it's done in a good way where they also bury the lead, because it's done when he's also looking back at his past. Like, we get obviously the scene which breaks my heart every time, like the opening scene where he's sitting with Peggy Carter, and like the fact that she's still alive but is, you know, got dementia and doesn't always remember him and stuff, and him looking back to his past and it being missing. It's like they heavily hint at it, but I think they bury it well enough. Like, if you don't know what you're looking for, you won't necessarily see it. Let me just jump to the chat quickly. Sorry, just Batman saying, hey there all, thanks for joining us, Bat, and thank you for that host as well. We appreciate it, man. Thank you for joining us for our MCU chat today.
Yeah, I think it's one of those like things that they hid very well, but like your second watch through, you start it so that you can pick up on all those things where they're hinting at it.
Oh yeah,
It's like, oh yeah, yep, and that's something that the MCU has done phenomenally with in general, is that you're just like absorbing everything your first watch through and just are just blown away, and then you watch it a second time, you're like, oh, the thought that went into each and every one of these scenes is just crazy.
Yeah, like you forget so much stuff until you go back and rewatch it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll say on my end, like, while I think the action is good, I also think you could have plugged a lot of this action into any, like, James Bond, Mission Impossible, and like the only thing that really would have felt out of place is Falcon. But like, and even that, like, that just kind of would be pushing for those movies. But like, as great as like the choreography is when like Cap fights the Winter Soldier, it just feels less because it is to a degree just two humans fighting. And so like it's one of those things that, like, as I watched back through it, I was just like this is cool, but I guess like
it's more human and less superhero in how it feels.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's the thing as well, is like you kind of see that hint. I think that's one of the things they hint at. It's a little bit more than human, but it's still a human element. It's because a big part of it is, if you watch Winter Soldier, it's about the characters, it's about the story, it's about who they are and getting invested in that. And we even see that with Cap earlier on. Like, this is the first time we're getting to see him really go toe to toe in a fist fight like this. We've seen a little bit of it with Red Skull in the first movie, but like, even then it wasn't really a straightforward fight. And when we see him at the start of Winter Soldier, like, massive shout out to the random appearance of George St. Pierre, the UFC fighter, appearing as Bartrock the Leaper. What a random casting. But like, when we see they're fighting off against each other, it's like, yeah, it's a decent fight, it's decently choreographed, but like, it's over in seconds. Like, so getting to actually have someone you can put against Cap where you can have a literal like toe-to-toe fight with, and it portrays like who Cap is as well. And like, yeah, don't get me wrong, it could be in pretty much any like action movie. You know, I'm a sucker for action movies though, so like I'm one of those things watching, like, I'm okay. I can, as long as I care about the characters, yeah, beat the crap out of each other, I'm good. But like, it's so well choreographed and it's so well done. Like, even the setups, like that big fight scene where like he's chasing Natasha and like Steve comes in for the save. Like, even the setup of the car getting tossed and like Falcon and Natasha like getting involved fighting the other Hydra agents, and then, you know, him taking on Bucky and them all getting like, you know, captured at the end. And it's like, I love the whole setup for stuff like that. I love, because you invest in the characters so much, and I get to see this great fight scene, and then the reveal that it's Bucky, and just seeing Cap's heart break when he's like, wait a minute, that's my best friend and he doesn't even know me. As like,
And I think in a lot of ways, like, it's really interesting to look at this movie, and I kind of made a similar point when we were talking about Iron Man 3. But you can kind of look at this movie and Iron Man 3 as like inverses of each other. Like, Iron Man 3 doesn't really get you to care about anyone other than Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Whereas this is, you have Bucky, you have Falcon, you have Cap, you have Natasha, you have Nick Fury, you have like all of these characters. It really gets you to care about. And even setting up Cap's neighbor for her role in
Yeah.
Civil War. Like it very much like sets up all of those people and gets you to care about them. Whereas Iron Man is just like Tony Stark and suits, and it's like in that one you get this really like superhero-y action,
Yeah.
but you don't really get invested. Like there's not really a concern that Pepper's gonna die. There's like, but in this it's like you could see them killing someone with like having Winter Soldier kill someone.
Well, yeah, because there's a legitimate moment at the start where it looks like Fury's dead, and I'm like, and there is a legitimate thing of like, no, they didn't kill Nick, did they? And like, you're heavily thinking they probably didn't kill him, but you don't actually know in this movie. Maybe they did, because it just kind of keeps going without him and this whole other stuff. I mean, the movie's about the fall of Shield, so like, it's like maybe we don't need Nick Fury anymore. Maybe it's the end of it all, you know. Then obviously he pops back up at the end because he's Samuel L. Jackson, and like, hell, are they going to kill him off? But
Yeah, seriously.
you know, it's like, but I think that's it. Like, yeah, I got so invested in these characters. Even characters like you got me invested in like Sam. Sam's barely in it at the start, and like by the time they go to his house when him and Natasha are on the run, it's like I'm all in for like Falcon like signing up. He hands over like, this is my resume. Like, hell yeah, let's get him in there. I want to see Falcon. You know, I get so invested in these characters and what's happening with them. And then of course you get the massive reveal though. Like it's still great watching it, but I remember that reveal when I first saw it, that Hydra was at the core of S.H.I.E.L.D. They've actually been running it the whole time, and they're all throughout the security, they're all throughout the government, they're all throughout everywhere. You know, I did not see that coming. I figured that Hydra might pop back up again because there's still a thing in the comics, but it looked like, okay, maybe we're just moving on. It's like, no, they're actually in the midst of all of this, and it was like, it was such a big reveal. I remember that when I first seen it. It blew me away.
I remember that one, like that when I saw it in theaters, there was just gasps at that just bit, basically, in the theater. So.
No, absolutely, and I think it's done so well. Like even like they bring in like Robert Redford, who phenomenal job in this, like as part of the World Council, and basically becomes head of S.H.I.E.L.D. when it looks like Fury's dead and stuff, and it turns out he's Hydra and stuff. It was like, and realizing how high does this go, and even the throwback to like the senator that hated Tony Stark in Iron Man 2 showing up again, and he's Hydra, and there was so many little connections in this that I thought were so cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but what about you guys? What did you think of like the reveal of Hydra and stuff, and this big twist at the end of Cap, and the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. and taking it all down completely?
It's a very comic booky thing.
Yeah.
Like it's like not in a bad way, but like even like with Nick Fury's like death, it's just like it's Nick Fury, and it's just one of those things of like you have a super secret organization, then you have a super secret organization within that organization, and it's just like, yeah, like the twist is very well done. Like, don't get me wrong, but it just feels very comic booky, of like we were the villains the whole time. Like,
yeah. Although in saying that, they do kind of set that up as well. Like, although they don't set up necessarily it being Hydra, they do point out, like, I mean, the whole start of it is the clashing between, you know, Captain America and S.H.I.E.L.D.
right.
Yeah.
Like, in the way the organization runs, and basically him being proven correct. Like, yeah, this is corrupt, even more than we thought. It has to go. But yeah, it's definitely a very comic booky sort of twist to it. Again, though, in saying that, like, I feel like kind of like some of the other stuff, I could see that in an action movie quite easily. You know, it's like or a spy thriller sort of thing. Not necessarily like it's top of the line quality stuff, but like, yeah, I feel like it fits into the sort of themes it was going for.
And you kind of get that with Phase 2 as a whole, where they're like experimenting with different genres.
Yeah. Definitely.
Especially compared to Phase 1, where just kind of like every movie just is a superhero movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this, you like, to your point, like it very much is just, it is James Bond. They're basically trying to do that style of movie, but with Cap, and it's very well done. But like It's just very like, we're gonna take the most comic booky trope and the most spy thriller trope, and they happen to be the same thing, and we're just gonna put them together.
Yeah.
And at this
We'll
point,
give you that, yeah.
it's all still early on enough in terms of like developing the Infinity War storyline and just the MCU in general that they're still getting their footing.
Right.
In some sense, they've established themselves with Phase 1, but they're still figuring out what direction they're going in.
Yeah.
And like what kind of genres they want present in that bigger story that they're presenting, and this like the smaller stories they tell within that. So I don't totally blame them in that sense.
Yeah. And that's it, and it's like, it's one of those things, like, I don't mind like a trope and a cliche if it's done well.
Yeah.
You know, I guess that's the thing for it. It's like, yeah, these things are definitely very like cliche and very tropey of like the sort of genre they're going for, absolutely. But at the same time, I'll sit and watch stuff like that as long as it's told in a good story.
Yeah.
You know, there's a reason it's a cliche, because if it's done well, it's good. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, 100%, I'll say that these are definitely very tropey sort of things.
There's in general just things you can't avoid with superhero movies.
Yeah, it's like, and it's
especially for it being a comic book thing. Like, yeah, you have like the reason why these are successful is because it does a great job of changing things that you expect from the comics in a way that surprises you, while still maintaining that feel for those who are the original fans of the comics and as you come into watching these movies.
Absolutely. All right, as our time's kind of moving on, let's jump into the next one. Again, arguably one of the best movies of the MCU. I don't think I've ever met a person that did not enjoy this movie. We're talking about Guardians of the Galaxy.
You should meet my mom. She did not like Guardians of the Galaxy.
No.
Okay, there is one negative thing that came from this movie. And that's the overuse of these 80s power rock anthems throughout the rest of the MCU now. It was so fitting for this movie, and it
works
done
for
so
Guardians.
well.
Yeah.
And then now it's just everywhere, and I'm just like,
What, you don't
think
like
of the song?
What, you don't like the immigrant song in Thor?
I don't mind
Constantly
it. Just like
being used pretty much at every opportunity.
every opportunity, and I'm just like, I mean, like, I get it, but
yeah, I will say that
like,
my wife had that same complaint. She watches the Marvel movies with me, and she had that same thing. She's like, "Why has Thor got the immigrant song in it?" That's because they're going for a kind of like, you know, 80s vibe apparently to it. And she's like, "But I thought that was a Guardian of the Galaxy thing,
right?
Like, that sort of song." And I'm like, "Yeah, it kind of is."
It's like the success of that soundtrack. We're like, well, we'll just do this for the rest of the movies. Now we don't have to think about it. Like,
yeah, and it's like, no, it's like, no, you had a purpose for that soundtrack. Yeah.
Like there's so many good indie stuff out there that you can use potentially, or you know, good writers anymore. But
that's the thing. It worked. It worked for Guardians because like they set it up so well. Like, that's his connection to home. That's Peter's connection to his mom. That's he plays the awesome mix. You know, the cassette. He's still got his Walkman. And like, it's that connection back to the fact he's from Earth, even though he never goes back to it. It's like, it was a cool way of doing it. And even in then, like, James Gunn was very specific on like what the songs represent and what they say in them to match the tones of the movie and to tell a story as well. And it's like, it's so well done. And then it's like, yeah, they kind of just start throwing stuff. Even Volume 2 for this isn't quite as well done as Volume 1 in terms of its soundtrack. Like, it's still good, but like this first movie, like I mean, I watched this back for coming up for this, and like I still had as good a time as ever watching this. Like, I still enjoy this movie thoroughly. You know, is it absolutely perfect? Yeah. No, but like but hell yeah, I'll throw it on at any opportunity and just watch it, and I know I'm going to enjoy it.
Well, it's just like an obscure group of characters that you would have never expected them to do a feature-length film about, and it's so good. They did such a great job on this, and yes, the soundtrack is so well thought out. And I also just love that they use those 80s to also signify the like contrast of technology in the 80s for when he ended up going to space and is living in like and interacting with all of these technologically advanced cultures, and he's still clinging to this piece of analog
Oh yeah.
audio equipment, and it's the most important thing to him.
I still
And I
to this
love
day
it.
want to know where he gets that cassette player from that's in his ship. Like the big
Yeah.
one he's got in his ship. I'm like, where did you find that? Like, how long did it take you to scavenge an actual like cassette player that would fit into your ship? And because it comes through his sound system in his ship, I'm like, that must have taken you forever to try and get that to connect.
I'm sure someone has come up with a theory for it.
They probably have.
mean,
There's probably millions of
Like,
theories online
There's
for it.
theories for everything out there.
No,
One
absolutely.
of the things that I really liked about Thor: Dark World that I'd completely missed is that like mid-credit scene where they like, take the Aether to the Collector,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like how that really sets up why Star-Lord's out trying to get the Power Stone. Like I'd completely missed that going into Guardians the first time, but like that's such a cool like little tie-in that this guy I mean his name is the Collector, is just trying to actually get the Infinity Stones, and he's just a guy.
Yeah. It's just a
Like,
random
trying to
guy,
get
and
him.
like he almost ends up with 2 of the stones.
Right.
Like
And
off.
then I really like one of the things that I think is super important to the MCU as a whole is opening up to like cosmic threats
Mhm.
that are not all like an invading force. Like, because that's very much what we'd seen up to this point in the MCU, is it was the attack on New York, and then Asgardians, and then people that had beef with the Asgardians. Like that's really all we'd seen so far.
Yeah.
And it very much opening up to there's a bunch of different cultures. The Kree are everywhere, and some of them conveniently look human, so we don't have to do that much makeup.
Oh, don't even
But,
get me
like-
started on that one.
But like it's just so important to the like overarching story, like where you can now get characters like Captain Marvel that we'll see later on, where like while there's the whole memory thing, she's very much just part of this other culture, and like that's pretty cool. Like it's great that we get to actually see that, and Guardians very much is that vehicle for introducing us to those. Like we get the Nova Corps, and like while like I have serious issues with the Nova Corps as a whole in this movie and how they're
Yeah.
portrayed.
I wasn't happy with the
Like,
Nova Corps. That was
it-
one of my big things in this.
Right. We did a watch party with some people in our Discord to watch like for Guardians, and one of the like my comments going through is like, why do the Nova Corps ship's shield thing not cover the cockpit? Like that seems like an oversight.
Yeah, that's
Like,
that's
you
a
should-
fairly good question actually.
Like the ships are literally designed to make a shield and kill the pilot.
Yeah, it all comes out from the spires. It's like cockpit completely exposed. Like, yeah, that wasn't a good design.
And so it's really cool. Like, I mean, I would love for us to see Nova. I mean, I'm very much in that camp.
Yeah,
That if we could actually get that character on board.
yeah, I want to see that. Can I ask a question as well? Just speaking to like the Nova Corps and the Xandarians, like on Xandar, what do the Xandarians look like? Because like Quill goes to sell the orb to that guy, like that he was meant to like sell it off to.
Mhm.
And he's got a kind of humanoid look, but he's clearly an alien, and he references like that Ronan hates his culture, referencing like okay he's from Xandar. And then every other person that is from Xandar, like every member of the Nova Corps, all look human. I'm like, is he just a weird looking one, or like are you all like choosing to look human, or like because when I think like people from Xandar, I guess I'm not thinking the whole Nova Corps look like they're human beings. I feel like that was just very lazy like costume design a little bit.
Like it in the sense that like we're not trying to be Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like we're not trying to create these super complex aliens. We're like, you know what? You're just gonna have to like almost like throwing your hands up and being like, you just gotta accept some of them look human.
Yeah.
Like, does it make the most sense? Nope. Like
Yeah.
some of them are literally Kree, but they look human. That's weird.
Yeah, that's
Like,
true.
And there's some background, but it's
I guess just when you're out on like actually on Xandar, like when you see the whole like promenade and like Rocket's doing his whole look around thing, like you get some really interesting kind of designs out there and some interesting looking aliens, and then like just the whole Nova Corps look human.
It's like anyone that's like on the front line, like in the frame, that's actually a character,
Right.
is just human.
Yeah.
And then you throw in everyone else, like, sure.
No, exactly. I'm like, that's my only thing I kind of looked at. I just kind of thought that. I've never thought that before watching this movie, and it just kind of hit me when I was watching it this time through. Like, why are they all looking human? And I'm like, it's really random to me. Like, but you know, there's probably a reason for it. I'm sure. But it doesn't matter now. Xandar's gone.
Yeah. Rip.
Bummer, dude.
Oops.
Is all of Xandar destroyed, or is it 50%?
Well, I'm assuming Thanos destroyed a fair bit of it getting the Power Stone in the first place.
Yeah.
And then I assume whatever was left got half of it snapped away as well. So, there's a question for you. Did everyone that got snapped away actually come back? If we never see any alien planets, who knows? There you
Yeah,
go.
I
very
mean, that's what I like to think.
very
But-
Earth focused.
Don't we see Asgardians though in the final fight? I could be misremembering. So
We see Valkyrie.
okay, I was thinking that we
I
saw.
don't know if we
general
see any
Asgard-
more though, but we definitely see like Valkyrie coming in on her winged horse, but I can't actually remember if we see any more. Okay, I'll give myself a question now. We need to go away and look at this myself. But anyway, to actual Guardians of the Galaxy.
It's a different phase anyway.
Yeah, that's a whole other
Anyway.
phase conversation. That whole phase is going to need to be like a two-part on itself, probably.
Right. Again, lackluster villain, just
Yeah,
a zealot. Okay,
yeah.
we
Rodent.
get that. He dies at the end. No continuation there. Perfect. But
Put a
like,
bow on it. Like,
yep. But in general, the group, like the primary group of Guardians of the Galaxy, their just interactions with each other are just perfect.
Oh yeah.
Also, another Doctor Who character, actor,
Yep.
Stephen, Karen Gillian.
Yep. Karen Gillian.
That's my other Doctor Who call out for the day.
Also,
Nebula.
also Scottish. Call it as I am Scottish. Karen Gillian is actually Scottish.
Yeah, she is.
And Nebula's the one that loses the arm in this one.
Yep. Although she does
Yeah.
do it to herself as well, though. Right at the end,
Right.
it's like hacks off her arm or her hand at least. To it's okay. She can
And it's the
rebuild.
left one again, isn't it? It's always the left.
Yeah, it is actually. It's the left
Yeah.
one again.
It
Right.
is always the left arm.
She's
It's
fine though.
because
She can
everyone's
rebuild herself.
righty.
Everyone's
We're all
right-handed.
righty.
The MCU is full of
Lefties.
right-handed people. There's no left-handed people in the MCU.
Yeah, just no lefties. We're all righties. So if you need to chop off an arm, chop off your left one.
Please chop off my right.
Poor Chris. You're just underrepresented.
But
In general, everything's made for right-handed people. I mean, that's just the
Yeah.
truth.
well, my wife feels your pain. She's left-handed as well, and she feels your pain on that one. Everything's like right-handed, and it doesn't work for left-handed people.
Yep.
But yeah, for Guardians of the Galaxy, like honestly, like I enjoy this movie. It's just so fun. From I like the introduction of like how we see Quill getting picked up by the Ravagers to that opening credit and opening montage as we see, you know, Quill going to get the orb and just dancing through the planet and stuff. Like it has a great fun feel to it, but it's also got great characters. Like I love the whole crew. Them all kind of fighting on Xandar and like trying to like get each other. Like as they try to like Groot and Rocket try to capture Quill, and then Quill and Gamora fighting over the orb to go into the prison where they pick up Drax. Like just every interaction with them is it's so enjoyable. Like they're just such a fun group of people to just like kind of watch, and they feel very human and very like I can connect with them. Like every single
Yeah.
one of them is like they're just such a down to earth group. We've got Batman in the chat saying he's a lefty as well. So there you
Oh.
go. Lefties unite.
Yeah, Batman Benno.
Lefties unite. But yeah, but like just overall the whole thing of it, I really enjoy this movie. Like I really don't have a big negative thing on Guardians of the Galaxy, and like I'm sure there is negative stuff and I'm probably just not thinking it through, but like for the most part I'm like, yeah, I enjoy this movie. I can put it on at any time.
I think it's
In
more
term-
nitpicky stuff. Like,
Right.
I definitely have complaints about this movie, but they're like, it's the Nova Corps example.
Mm.
It's like, it's nitpicky that the ships are designed in a really dumb way. Like it's not like an overall plot issue like we have with Iron Man 3 and Thor: Dark World.
Mm.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
It's
one of
just a
those
small piece, and it was
Right.
just boom, and it was it. One thing I would say is like rewatching this, Like, I have such an appreciation for Yondu as a character throughout the Guardians of the Galaxy movies.
Oh yeah.
Like looking like you can tell that character was planned out for the entire thing. Just looking at his interactions with Quill and like how he thinks and talks to him, and like his interactions with his crew regarding bringing him back alive, being all this, and like at the very end when he's looking, he's kind of like smirking that he was fooled and happy that
Yeah.
Quill is on this path now, and it's just like, oh, whereas like the first time you watch it, when it came out, you're like, oh man, I this guy's kind of like, I mean, he's kind of set up as like the pseudo villain in a sense, and now you're just like, oh, Yondu.
Yeah. Yeah, this movie definitely does a lot of great setup for Yondu, and it's like, if you watch both, like Volume 1 and Volume 2 of it, you definitely get this awesome story of learning who his character is, because you get so much depth in the second one. But even just
Mary
watching him in this
Poppins,
first one.
y'all.
What do
Yeah,
you say?
happens, yeah.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all.
Oh, yeah. Someone made a t-shirt of that, and I still want it. Like Yondu holding on to his arrow going, "I'm Mary Poppins, y'all." Like, I want that t-shirt so badly.
Right.
I like...
You know it was Yondu that went back and got him that cassette player.
Oh,
for
yeah.
shit. That's definitely what happened.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we even see that at the end of Volume 2. Was it like he was holding on to it for him, the Zune?
Yeah.
Like, it's given to him, like, the boss found this for you, and it's what they use on Earth now, and he hands him the Zune, and like... Which I love just the joke of that in itself. But,
I love that scene. That's one of my favorite pieces.
It's so well done. Like, and Michael Rooker, just a completely underrated actor. He's so good.
Mhm.
He's so good. And like, I love Yon doing this. And like, see the moment he brings out that freaking arrow. Like, you don't know what to expect at first, and then when he uses it in that big final fight, I'm like, that's one of the best scenes in this. Like, just that he just whistles and that arrow just flies through every single guard near him. I'm like, it's just so cool.
It was so well animated in the.
Oh yeah. It's such a unique weapon as well. Like, I don't think I've ever seen like a weapon like that, especially in a sci-fi thing. Like, just whistling and making this arrow do what he wants. It's so unique. I've never seen anything like it, and it's like, he's just... The more I watch the Guardians movies, the more I love Yondu as a character. He's so good. I do also find in this movie that I prefer Drax more than I do in the second one.
I agree.
I feel like in the second one, like, I feel like the issue with him and Rocket in the second one was they found what people found funny, and they just overdid it too much in the second one. And this one, it's just right. Like, Rocket has the right level of humor to him. Drax is like not understanding stuff. It's just at the right level. Like, even just stuff like that, oh, he takes everything literally. Everything goes over his head. Like, nothing would go over my head. And too quick, I would catch it.
Right, whereas like they overemphasized it. It's like, well, where can we get those quips in whenever we can? Whereas it was like a natural quick quip when they were talking about him and he overheard.
Yeah, it's like, it was just so natural. It was so easy, and that's what made it funny. In the second one, they did overdo it a little bit, especially towards Mantis. Like, he's downright cruel to her in that movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you can back off a little bit. Like, I get it, you think she's ugly. Okay, yeah, that's the... Okay, you don't... Okay, we're going to go with this for the rest of... Okay. Rest of the movie, we're going to keep calling her ugly in different ways. Fantastic. That's apparently the joke. Awesome.
Right.
It's like, it's
Yeah,
just
that was
too overdone. Don't get me wrong, I still like the second movie, but yeah, it's definitely, the first one is so much better. So, anyone last thoughts on Guardians? I think, there's nothing too much to go into in this, so here we go into the next big one as we hit the second Avengers movie, Avengers Age of Ultron. What were our thoughts on the second outing for the Avengers?
The worst Avengers movie.
Oh yeah.
Hands down.
Yeah.
Like, not a contest. Like,
Yeah, 100% the worst.
Ultron in general is a product of a Tony that shouldn't exist at this point. Just due to Iron Man 3, as you already mentioned.
Yeah.
Not a compelling villain. It's just a standard. It's a very typical rogue AI plot.
Yeah. I wanted to love Ultron so much, especially with James Spader playing him. There was so much potential there.
Played very well. It's just like,
Yeah.
the character itself is just...
Not a good character in general. Like, it wasn't well put together. It's like, oh, okay, and standard humans kind of suck, and your plans for me to support you aren't what I want to do now because the only way to help humans is to destroy
Is it
them.
me, or does Ultron go from like being created and getting the objective to peace in our time to humans suck, we need to kill them all very quickly?
Very cool.
Like
So,
literally
Very
by the time he
Very
gets
quick.
into a body, he's like, yeah, you all suck, you all need to die. Like,
And why does this AI hate Tony so much just out of nowhere? Like,
Yeah.
like he gets so angry when Tony gets brought up.
yeah, like he won't even, like, Jarvis goes to call him and he's like, how dare you call him? Why do you call him sir? And I'm like, why is that an issue to you? You barely,
Yeah.
you've literally just looked him up. You've got nothing against him. Like, why are you so mad at Tony? And like, I can see why you get mad at him later as you learn more about him, you know, and maybe stuff hits you. But like right off the bat, I'm like, yeah, you all suck. You all need to die. You're my biggest threat. And I'm like, okay,
Also, like, why is the AI like capable of such anger?
yeah, like out,
Yeah.
like off the bat.
Like your character, like the anger part is just weird coming from something that's supposed to be an AI. The purpose, the reason why you are going the route you go is because it is logical for you to go through that route. Like in terms of that humans are the parasite of Earth, and to protect Earth, you should remove humans. That's the logical piece. But he's just, why is he angry when he's doing it?
Yeah.
It's a piece that
There's
just
that
doesn't make
added
sense for.
emotional.
Yeah, there's an emotional component that kind of comes out of nowhere, and I guess you can kind of throw in like, oh, it comes from the Mind Stone, he was created from that, so maybe it has an effect on him or something. But it still kind of comes out of nowhere, and regardless of how you try to put it. Also, can I be like the first one to say, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch serve no purpose in this movie. You could literally take them out, and it changes nothing. In fact, they don't make sense. Why does Ultron recruit them? He has an issue with human beings. He thinks that the best thing to do is to wipe out humanity to start again. Why does he recruit two superpowered people?
For that, I think it's the to go like to a point we just had about Ultron's anger. I think this is super logical. This is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So like this is just a formula. It's these people don't like the Avengers. I don't like the Avengers. I need to get them to team up with me for some help.
I guess I
Help,
just
quote.
I see it as like he doesn't care about any of humanity. So like, and he's literally creating other versions of himself. Like he's literally within all these bodies. Why randomly
Right,
get
right.
these two?
But he
Their
also
use
recruits
is-
them before he's like vibranium Ultron too.
Yeah, but even
Like,
then, like
he-
if his
as
body,
he-
but he even says that like if his body gets destroyed, he just goes into a new one. He keeps making
Right.
new bodies. Like I feel like they've like, okay, yeah, we're getting this partnership here, but I'm like, I feel like bringing in two humans, especially two superpowered humans, especially two that are as emotionally like over the edge as Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are, that would be an illogical factor that he wouldn't want to deal with.
He may have perceived like their powers as a potential threat as he grew. So if he recruited them, he could keep them close and eliminate them at the earliest possibility, so that they don't undermine him if they begin to realize what his actual intentions are.
Right. And
Maybe?
it does
I don't
strike me
know.
as a very like it's going to be a double cross. Like curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
Yeah,
Right,
like
yeah.
I mean, it's like it's clearly set up for that for the get go. Like these two are literally put with him just to turn on him.
But yeah, the characters are just, yeah,
Yeah, you literally
Like,
could have had them
it-
not in
it's
this
just
movie,
like-
and it wouldn't have changed anything.
right. It's just like a, hey, by the way, here's for you fans, here's Scarlet Witch,
Which I'm
here's
like
Quicksilver.
So I really like
They're not
Scarlet Witch
important.
in this movie. I completely agree with what we're saying that like they're kind of just serve as any force.
Yeah.
But like for what we see Scarlet Witch become in the later movies, I really
Mhm.
like how they set her up here
Yeah,
as like she's a superhero threat that her power isn't just blast stuff. Like she does some of that, but like for the first like hour and a half or whatever, you never really see her take like an offensive action against a hero.
yeah,
It's all the deception, the
All
mind,
the mind games.
and I think that's really cool. I thought it was a very cool way of making her not feel like generic villain who's upset at Tony Stark.
Mhm.
yeah.
And it's like I really like that. And I mean, Scarlet Witch is one of my favorite parts of the MCU. Like WandaVision is like my most like it's
Hyped.
WandaVision and Thor: Love and Thunder are the two things I'm most excited for right now.
Yeah.
I'm
and
ready
so-
for the horror movie Doctor Strange.
Oh, well, yeah, well,
I'm
which will
Yeah.
tie
so
in
stoked
from
for that.
WandaVision.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
And so like I really like how they plugged her in. And it kind of does the thing of like this is her origin story, but also just isn't an origin story.
Yeah.
Which I think is one of the best ways that they can do this is like they can give you this character, make you care about them. And while she doesn't do like you can kind of just insert any hero into that slot, like for both her and Quicksilver. I really like that they do give you enough growth that when she becomes an Avenger, when she has that moment when she steps out of the house after talking with Hawkeye, who's like also like Avenger's dad in this movie, which
Yeah.
is pretty great.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
Hawkeye in this movie. He's amazing.
Like she just has that moment when she walks out, and it makes that feel earned.
Yeah.
Like where it's not just hey, we need you to fight. Oh, okay, I'm ready. Like she very much has that like I volunteered for this and I got this experiment done and now I have these powers, but I didn't sign up to like be in war necessarily. But then she comes to that grip, and I just think that is such a good. It's so well earned. Even again, if you could kind of plug anyone into that slot, but I love where it sends her off for the rest of the MCU.
Oh yeah, I totally have to agree with that. Like I do love Scarlet Witch in the movies. I do love her inclusion in them. I think the way they build her up, even as we go into like Civil War and into the other Avengers movies, it's done really well. And I love the setup in this with like even that scene when they're in Sokovia and like she's talking with Hawkeye and he like gives her that pep talk, and he really takes over that role as a kind of mentor friend role to her here that you do get to see kind of carry on. It's really well done. It absolutely is, and it's like I do love her character. I hate that she's almost a throwaway character in this, like her and Quicksilver not having a true purpose.
Yes.
But at least they build her up to something awesome. At least they do that with her, since Quicksilver's a throwaway character. Who?
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you put him in this movie, he has no personality, he has no moments to build him up.
His
Literally, so
literal
you
purpose
can
is to
just
save
kill him
Hawkeye
off.
and die.
Yeah.
Like
Which is like, it was almost like they put him in here just for a twist, because they're clearly setting up Hawkeye as the person to die in this movie. We learn about Hawkeye's family. He keeps talking about, once I get back home, I'll start doing this and that, and it's like, and this is like my last mission sort of thing, and like, rewatching it back, like, yeah, they're clearly heavily hinting that Hawkeye's not making it home at the end of this, which I'm glad they didn't do, because I absolutely adore Hawkeye in this movie. I'm glad he gets this much treatment, because we've seen barely anything of him yet. Which that was one of my interesting things about Winter Soldier. Why wasn't Hawkeye in that? He's technically a SHIELD agent.
Yeah.
At no point he was brought in. Like, really? Okay. But I'm glad we get to see that from him. But I still have an issue with Quicksilver dying in this. Like, you have super speed,
it's not quite fast enough.
and you had enough super speed to push him behind the car and take the bullets yourself. Like, sorry, I'm going to call BS on that.
Yeah.
You're a super speedster, and you're the one that gets, like, if he got like caught by Ultron and like ripped apart or something, fair enough. If he like went to go toe to toe and Ultron like was able to analyze him and catch him and do something, no, he just got gunned down. And I love the fact of like he was killed, and there was so much rumor going into like Infinity War, or like they're going to bring people back. Maybe they'll bring Quicksilver back. Nope. He literally exists to die in Age of Ultron.
And it's one of those characters that has so much potential in the universe itself, and you just
You could have done something great with him.
kill him off. No more Quicksilver.
Yeah, because because they looked like they were heavily hinting at that, because like you looked like they were hinting at them becoming Avengers, especially even at the end of this movie when you see like Cap and Black Widow and like the new Avengers recruits, and I'm like, it's almost like that was echoing the comics, because when the new Avengers recruit come in, when a lot of the originals step away, Cap has like Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver and Hawkeye on the team, so it was like, oh, we're kind of echoing that a little bit. No, we're just gonna kill him.
That's one of my biggest, like, it's not like a complaint about this movie, but kind of like overall MCU, is like this movie sets up this new Avengers team that we then never really see the Avengers.
Oh yeah, I hate that. Like, we see it at the start of Civil War, and it actually,
like,
that
they're
opening of Civil War is actually really cool.
Right, but we never see them like I mean, because that scene is a failure. Like, we never see them succeed as the Avengers.
Yeah.
And then, oh, just kidding. We're just gonna bring back all the other Avengers from the other movies now.
Yeah.
Because this Avengers team doesn't cut it on their own, and it's just like, it's a very cool setup that I don't think was paid off very well.
No,
Fortunately,
definitely not.
they've pushed the MCU as a whole toward that point where you have to focus on these other characters, and I'm really looking forward to that now.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
like don't use characters as these random throwaway pieces. Like I love that you like so far in the MCU we've developed Tony Stark and Iron Man, and that's what makes his loss like actually this big piece. Quicksilver, I don't care that he died because I don't care about him as a character because we just saw him run around.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't make us care about him to begin with.
No,
Right.
there was
So it
no
was like-
interest in his character at all. Absolutely.
Unless you're an avid like comic book person who knows that Quicksilver and Wanda are X-Men and that there's the whole legal rights issue.
Yeah.
Why would everyone care?
Yeah,
Like-
but like even their characters as a whole were throwaways in this. I mean, even the introduction of them, we get that scene at the end, like in the end credits prior to this, setting up that they use, Strucker used the scepter to create them, and it's like that whole opening sequence is just a throwaway for me. Like I completely don't buy into it. Like it feels like we're going to jump straight into the action, and I'm like, I much more enjoy when we actually get to Avengers Tower and we have like the whole party scene and then just relaxing and interacting with people, and I start getting into the movie at that point. The whole opening just feels like a rush to have like Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch there, and also get rid of Strucker and give them the scepter so that everything's set up for what's to come.
I
It's
mean,
like-
that's kind of how most action is. That like, it's always a setup for the next beat. And,
I know, but
like,
it feels like they were setting up something to happen with that at that end credit scene, and then it's like 10 minutes into the movie. Okay, let's just jump straight to the next point. Like,
I mean, like, and I like that first fight. I think it's good. My note I have on that is so many team up moves.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
And I really like I say that as a joke, but like also there's way too many team up moves. But I do like that for that Avengers team, we get to see that this isn't their first battle. Like they fought enough together that they very much have a system of how they work, and that's really cool. And to your point, it is very quick. Tony just like or Jarvis just pretty quickly figures out where the generator is, and we're able to blow it up, and then we can get inside.
yeah.
But
As like,
I really like that.
Can I say as well, we go from like having them all fighting together, like in such unison there, to literally being at each other's throats and arguing with each other for the rest of the movie, right up until Vision's created. They do nothing but argue with each other pretty much and have shots at each other. And it's like I get their different personalities and stuff, but some of it's like it's almost like early like first Avengers movie where like they still don't trust each other fully. And it was almost like a step backwards, I felt like, in some of it. Like even the arguments between like, Cap and Tony, and I get there's still tension there, they're leading up to Civil War and stuff. But like it felt like very early, like you two are meant to be friends, you're meant to trust each other at this point, and along with that, like we get absolutely zero like consequence for Tony doing what he does.
Right.
Like
Well, also, yeah, he gets no pushback from Bruce, which would
He's like,
like
"But
I
we
felt like
could
should have
do
been like the number one critic, and Bruce was like, "Sure, okay, fine, let's figure it out."
Yeah, you created a
just, like-
murder bot, so like, you know what? I'm just going to right away help you create a second one
Yeah.
Right.
because this
just like-
time you're right because it didn't go horribly wrong before. And I'm like,
like to your point that you just had, like more
In
character
general.
conflict would have been good there. Like the
Right.
problem
Bruce
that we have
Banner-
is like we just needed Banner to have character conflict instead of Tony and Cap.
yeah,
Right.
Like, and so it's,
Yeah.
the plot point we had was good. Like having them work together, then having them seeing what will eventually becomes the Civil War fight. Like having that ripple through is really cool. We just need Banner. Banner just needed to be more involved in that
Yeah.
instead of being a pushover for Tony.
I just felt
He
like
was such a
it was
pushover in
too
this
focused on
one,
the Cap and Iron Man arguing each other thing, and I'm like, you could have done so much more, like dropped hints at Civil War without fully having them like being at each other. Because like Tony literally goes from like Ultron happens, says he's going to go off and basically destroy the world to make it better, to like when Tony's like they're literally all talking afterwards and see the wreck of what was Jarvis like in the system. Tony starts laughing. And like I get they're hinting at that, like, no, he shouldn't be laughing at this stuff, but like it's literally like he comes across like so much like he does not care that he's done this. As if like, you know what, this is exactly what I wanted to do, and I'm like, no, he's clearly said what he's going to do and it's not okay.
Well, it's supposed to be like you're still seeing the PTSD come through. 'Cause
Yeah.
You still like because this movie again, Iron Man 3 that we talked about, like, but that's what like that scene. We're supposed to be like, Tony still isn't all mentally there. Like this is not Tony. Like or this is Tony that has dealt with being kidnapped. Like all the events of the first Avengers movie, all of Iron Man 3 where Pepper almost died. Like he's dealt with all this conflict, and then this is just again, I tried to do this and everything fell apart.
Yeah.
Like
Because I think the thing
pain
for that is like you literally see him then kind of like when Fury comes to the farm, to Hawkeye's farm, and talks to him, and you kind of see him a little bit of like, I made a mistake. I was trying to protect everybody. You know, I seen the vision of everyone dead, and it was my fault. Like, okay, we get a bit of character growth, and then it's like the next scene is like, okay, let's do this again with a better AI made from Jarvis. This way, it won't go horribly wrong. I'm like, you have no idea that that's the truth. And then like Vision turns out to be good, and it's like, okay, everything's fine. I'm like, no, there's a conversation to happen there.
Right. There has to be another conversation. He has to like, and he just like, yeah, it's gonna be fine. He doesn't actually go into this is what we're actually fully doing different.
Yeah, you didn't get it right. You got lucky. That's what happened
Right.
here. Like you didn't like fully go, this is how it's going to work. You got lucky, and we all act like Tony was just smart enough to pull it off this time. Like, no, you almost
Right.
created a second one. What if he was bad?
They could have set it up to where like, yeah, he is smart enough that he actually like analyzed everything and made all the adjustments needed to be cautious, but
Yeah.
they don't do that in this. They're just like, okay, we will trust you got it right this time and let's do it again.
All right, so looking at our time, we are definitely starting to push into a longer show. This is probably our longest show we've ever done. Any last thoughts on Age of Ultron before we jump into the last one, Iron Man? And we'll try and keep this one short because I feel like it should be a fairly short convo for Ant-Man. Any other thoughts? Nope. All right, so jumping into what was the end of Phase 2, the introduction of Ant-Man. How did we feel on the Ant-Man movie?
Unexpectedly good.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. And like even like Guardians, we see that same type of a thing. Of it's like Ant-Man is way better than it has any right to be.
Yeah, 100%.
You know,
Saw the trailer and thought it was stupid, and then saw the movie and was pleasantly surprised.
I will say again, lackluster villain.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's just it's a carbon copy of Ant-Man.
But that's not the point of the movie. Isn't the villain? Like,
Yeah.
he's just there because you have to have one.
It's because it's a superhero movie and he has to fight somebody. The whole movie's about him getting the suit and learning to use the suit. Just because it's a superhero movie, he has to fight somebody. So it might as well be Yellow Jacket. Because why not?
Right.
And
Yeah.
like Yellow Jacket as an idea is really interesting. It's just
Yeah. Oh, they do
the
some
person
fun stuff.
in the suit.
I love what they do with it though. I mean, they do some great fight stuff. Like I love the fight in the bedroom when they're both small and like fighting on the train set and all this massive stuff. And it's literally just on a toy table with all like I love the setup for all of that. It's so well done.
Like so this movie really, like as you mentioned before, it really puts in a contrast what you do with something as small and how you do something great with it as like, yeah, we can make things small and we can make things big again. And then you have Thor the Dark World that has the convergence of the 9 realms that does,
Yeah.
There's some
That has so
gravity
much
issues.
Potential that they
It's
just,
just like-
yeah.
It just gets thrown away. Like those are like big things that you can do. Like people like want to see something crazy and amazing come from, and then instead we're getting that with we make stuff big, we make stuff small.
Yeah.
No,
A
absolutely. and-
stupid idea that they do well versus a great idea that they fail at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
And again, like to tie this back to how basically everything in this phase is just Iron Man 3 done well. Like Yellow Jacket versus Extremis. Like they actually make like even though the villain behind both of them is not interesting, they actually make like the Yellow Jacket suit fight fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus the Extremis fight, which is cool mainly because we see a whole bunch of armor, like Iron Man suits. But the actual
That's-
fight isn't that interesting.
Yeah.
In this one, like you get the train scene. You even like, and there's so much good. Like to go back to what you mentioned earlier with Guardians 2, like the comedy in this is so not forced, and it's so good. Like
so
you get the
Yeah.
scene, Yeah, like where the trains come in, and like, what would you do? You would be scared of getting hit with a train. Your brain would not say, "This is a toy train that can't hurt me."
No, absolutely not.
Like,
And
it's
that
just so
like
perfect.
the ant that they make big ends up being like their pet dog
Yes.
sitting under the table, like
Oh, it's so
begging
good.
for food. Like
It
what
is
else
so
would you
good.
do with a giant ant?
Mhm.
I
But
think,
it was a great end. It was a great introduction to Scott Lang and also his friends, the support cast.
oh, yeah.
Oh my
complete
gosh, they are
complete
so
opposite of Thor: The
good.
Dark World,
Yeah, I
where
was
I
just about to
absolutely
say,
hate the
very-
side characters. The Ant-Man side characters are amazing. You can put Luis in any movie, and I am okay with it.
Mhm.
He's like
Yeah.
100%. I am
Absolutely.
okay with Michael Pena being Luis in any Marvel movie. He was amazing. He
It-
stole it for me.
Oh,
It's like
like
it's
hit
just
the humor he brought to it, and just like also he's just such a great character in terms of like quick getting like I need a quick recap.
oh, the recap. I'm still waiting on a
The
recap
recap.
of like the
And
MCU
that
up to this
made
point by him.
That
Uh,
sold.
and Paul Rudd as well. Amazing casting as Scott
Mhm.
Lang. He was perfect. It's like I was wondering at first, like when they initially cast him, because at first they hadn't revealed it was going to be Scott Lang, so there was a lot of talk. Is like, is it going to be, is it going to be the Scott Lang character, or is it going to be like the original Ant-Man? Is it going to be like who are they going to do? And like, and the way that they did it, like, like with him coming in to play Scott Lang, it was just perfect. It was just absolutely perfect. And then bringing Michael Douglas in as Hank Pym is an older version of him who like becomes his mentor, and like it's so well cast. Like them in it, and then obviously Evangeline Lilly coming in as his daughter, who later on gets to become Wasp. Obviously, like it's so good. It's just another one of those. It's just so fun movies to watch.
And this is another movie that's a great example of tropes done really well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
This
100%.
movie is pretty much like a beat for beat, like it's a comedy, but it's a beat for beat heist movie.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Even down to like the very end where Scott gets trapped in the thing because they pull out the yellow jacket suit. It's so beat for beat, but it's so well done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, they just
absolutely.
handle those so well.
And that's it. It literally goes back to that me saying like I don't care about the trope as long as it's done well. Ant-Man's a perfect example of that. The trope is done so well, and I absolutely love it and adore it. It's don't get me wrong, not a massively perfect movie, but like I've never not had a good time. It's one of my favorite MCU movies, and it's like again like it has no right to be. It should not be in up my list as high as it probably is. But like I just every time I watch it, I enjoy it.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like in this phase, like with Guardians in the Galaxy and Ant-Man, just like obscure characters that you wouldn't expect them to do feature-length films for,
Yep.
is why I am excited for like Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
them to do these focuses on these obscure characters that no one's really ever heard of. Not only that, they're also moving to being a more diverse
Right.
group of heroes.
Yeah.
And I am so
Which
stoked
is
for it.
fabulous.
Yeah, and it opened up the door for even characters we've seen now, like seeing Doctor Strange being done, seeing Captain Marvel done, seeing Black Panther done. Like these were the testers for it, and because of how well they did, we got to open up this door to these amazing characters that we never would have gotten. I mean, I'm excited for the next Avengers movie just to see this new lineup of Avengers, because like pretty much all the old ones are gone. It's going to be a brand new cast of Avengers, and I'm excited for that. I'm pumped for that. I think it's going to be
Absolutely.
great. Alright, so I'm probably going to have to call it there for actual talk about the movies. If there's any last thoughts on Ant-Man, go ahead, throw it out. No, we good? Yeah, this is definitely our longest show, and I probably have to go wake my kid up at some point. So to hand over, First Geek 411, if you want to go ahead and do some plugging for your stuff, this is your chance to get it in there. To plug podcasts, socials, anything like that. I'll drop some
So
stuff
we
in
are
chat.
One Geek 411, just about everywhere. That's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We are also starting live streaming our podcast recordings Monday night at about 8:15 Mountain Time, because I'm the only one in Central, so we have to.
No,
go off
you mean
Mountain.
8:15 Central Time.
It's 8:15 Central Time. Man, time is a mystery.
Because it'll be 7:15 for us in
7
Mountain
minutes-
Time.
Okay.
I was gonna say
8:15
that's a
Central
little bit
Time.
later than planned.
Yes.
Anything I need to know?
Yeah. And so we will be streaming that. Thank you for dropping that link in chat. At twitch.tv/onegeek411. and we'll be going through some couple discussion topics. We'll be having fun, and then you can also find our podcasts pretty much anywhere that you get podcasts for our older episodes. Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, Google Podcasts, all that stuff.
If you can't find us, let us know so we can make
yes,
sure we
we
get added.
And then we also have a Discord. And so that's also a good place to come and hang out. We're working on doing at least a monthly movie night with people there. And so shout out to that. And again, come in tomorrow and hang out with us as we do our podcast recording. So
Yeah, definitely. And I've put all those links in chat for everybody, so you can go ahead and check out their website to get all the information and everything. Again, their social media is there for Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and then of course the Twitch channel there at the bottom. Go ahead and give that a follow, give them some love, and make sure to tune in tomorrow night. I'll definitely be tuning in. But thank you so much, First Geek 411, for all of you coming on the show. This has been absolutely great. I really need to start planning out timings of my shows better. I always think it's not going to last as long as it is. But thank you so much for coming on. Definitely have you all again on the show. Emma, definitely have you on when we do the talk of Doctor Who. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for...
You'll be able to find me somewhere.
Definitely. I'll grab a hold of you somehow. We'll make it work.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much, Comic Clan, for following us. I'm going to go and drop a raid to a friend of ours who I can see are streaming. Alright. So this is to CV No Pro. Go ahead and give her some love. Go ahead and give her a follow. She's a really good streamer. Go ahead and check out her stuff. I think she's playing Overwatch right now, but she also does D&D on the channel. She does was it Sea of Thieves? She does she's playing through Witcher stuff, all that sort of good stuff. So we're going to go ahead, drop her a raid, give her some love, and I'm going to head to her end screen, and you all have an amazing weekend. We'll see you again back here next week. Nitro will be joining us again, and we'll be going over the early 2000s movies that we missed that week that we had to go off. But you all have a great time, and we will see you next week.